Nara opened her eyes sleepily, only to find herself face to face with Gordon, who was lying across the table. His head rested peacefully against the wood, and their faces were mere inches apart. Gordon's hair had fallen across his face, and Nara reached out, her fingers gently brushing his hair away. She couldn't help but notice how peacefully he slept. The warmth of his skin against her fingertips sent a shiver through her, and she could feel his steady breath on her palm. Her heart swelled as she continued to admire the peaceful, handsome man before her. Suddenly, Gordon's eyes fluttered open, meeting hers with an intense, direct gaze. Nara's heart skipped a beat. She was caught off guard and hoped he hadn't noticed her touch. She was at a loss for words, her eyes locked on his as if in a trance. Gordon finally broke the silence with a soft, "Good morning." Nara remained speechless, her eyes wide, until Gordon lifted his head. She followed suit, her movements slow and unsteady. "Good morning," she managed to mutter, her voice barely above a whisper. Gordon stood and stretched, his body releasing a quiet groan as he scanned the room. The remnants of their night together, a wineglass and an empty bottle, were scattered across the table. "We must have fallen asleep by mistake," he said, looking around. Nara, still trying to piece together how she ended up in this state, struggled to remember the last thing she had done. Her head throbbed painfully as she tried to stand, only to collapse back into her seat with a pained cry. "Ouch!" she exclaimed, clutching her head. Gordon's concern was immediate. He rushed to her side, his hands gently supporting her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. As he leaned in, Nara felt his warm breath against her face and her heart raced uncontrollably. The proximity and his tender touch made her pulse quicken. She was overwhelmed by a mix of embarrassment and an unexpected surge of emotion. Gordon, noticing her discomfort, quickly withdrew his hands. "I think I have an aspirin in the car. Let's go get it." Nara nodded, trying to steady herself as she picked up the alarm clock, their original reason for coming to her house. She knew she was lightheaded and would only have the minimum of a glass of wine. The thought of why she had let herself get carried away plagued her mind as they headed outside. Once in the car, Gordon searched the glove compartment for the aspirin but came up empty. "I don't think the aspirin is here," he said, his brow furrowing with concern. Nara tried to reassure him with a strained smile. "Don't worry, I'm fine. I think the headache is easing up," she said, though the pain was still sharp. Gordon's eyes softened and he said, "Miss Vespertine, you know you're not very good at lying." Nara blinked in surprise. "Huh?" Gordon's tone was gentle but firm as he replied, "Sit tight. I'll take you to a drugstore to get some aspirin." He reversed the car and drove away, leaving Nara to reflect on his thoughtful gesture. She was touched by his concern and kindness. Her headache persisted, but the warmth of his gesture made her smile. As they drove, Nara recalled their conversation from the night before. She remembered asking him something before she fell asleep, and curiosity about what she had asked lingered in her mind. Her cheeks flushed as she tried to piece together the fragments of their conversation, and she couldn't help but wonder about the emotions that had prompted her to drink and talk so openly with Gordon. "Good morning, Mom," Briston greeted her as he took a seat beside Penelope, who lounged by the edge of the large swimming pool. A glass of orange juice rested on the table in front of her, and a plate of cake, half-eaten, lay beside it. Penelope glanced up at him but didn't return his greeting. Instead, she frowned slightly. "You came in late yesterday." Briston's face brightened with a sheepish grin. "Oh, yes, I went out for a drink with Yvonne last night." At the mention of Yvonne, Penelope rolled her eyes with a visible sigh, her expression a mix of disdain and frustration. Briston couldn't help but laugh at her reaction. "Come on, Mum, don't be like that." "I do not like that girl one bit," Penelope retorted, her voice tinged with irritation. "Mum? Tell me, what do you see in her?" Penelope's tone was sharp, yet curious. "Mum, Yvonne is a sweet girl. If you get to know her better—" Penelope picked up her glass of juice, taking a deliberate sip as if to steady herself. "Don't you think you need someone who can help you run the company when it's finally handed over to you?" Briston burst into uncontrollable laughter, the sound echoing around them. He laughed so hard that tears began to roll down his cheeks. "What's so funny?" Penelope asked, bewildered by his reaction. Her skepticism was palpable, her brows knitting together in confusion. When the company is handed over to me, you say? Come on, Mom, let's be realistic. Wait, you don't think you're capable of running the company? Penelope's voice held a note of surprise, her eyes widening. Can't you see who's been designated as the successor? Bristol's laughter subsided, replaced by a more serious tone. And who is that? Penelope asked, feigning ignorance, though her face was a mix of curiosity and veiled contempt. Gordon, of course! Penelope's response was immediate and loud, a burst of genuine, hearty laughter that nearly made her spill her glass of juice. She steadied herself, setting the glass back on the table. Well, that would be over my dead body, she declared vehemently. Mom, don't say that, Bristol pleaded, trying to defuse the situation. You know, I've always known you're a weakling. Penelope snapped, her eyes narrowing with disappointment. Can't you be more like me? Bristol's face fell, his features hardening. The word weakling stung deeply, especially coming from his mother after Yvonne had already used it. He folded his arms, trying to suppress his hurt. Do you know what it took me to get to where I am today? Penelope's voice was intense, filled with the weight of her struggles. You and I both know what could have become of us if I hadn't made the choices I made. Bristol took a deep breath, remaining calm despite the sting of her words. He knew well the ruthlessness of his mother, who had never spared even the smallest of inconveniences. I know, Mom, he said quietly, his voice steady. Then you won't just sit idly by and watch Gordon take what I've worked so hard for, Penelope said fiercely. But Mom, he's married to Nara now. You know Dad gave him the ultimatum to get married before— What kind of silly marriage was that? Penelope interrupted, her tone cutting and dismissive. Don't tell me you believe that stunt he pulled. Bristol's eyes widened in astonishment as he absorbed his mother's words. He was well aware of Penelope's sharp intellect and cunning, but her immediate dismissal of Gordon's marriage as a fabrication still took him by surprise. Leaning in, he spoke softly, ensuring their conversation remained private from the bodyguards stationed around them. You also think it's a lie, right? Of course it's a lie, Penelope hissed, her voice brimming with indignation. If Gordon thinks he can pull the wool over everyone's eyes, he's sorely mistaken. I'm no fool. Bristol's face lit up with agreement. I think you're right, Mum. Remember Edward Vespertine's birthday party I attended a few weeks ago? Penelope nodded, her curiosity piqued. Yes, I remember. She was there? Bristol continued. Who? Penelope's eyes sharpened with interest. Nara, of course. She was there with some guy, Bristol said, his tone laced with intrigue. Some guy? Penelope's brows furrowed, her interest clearly piqued. Yes, and the most interesting part is that she introduced him as her fiancé. Penelope's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. She let out a burst of laughter, her amusement mingled with frustration. Gordon. Always smart and up to something, she said, her fingers fidgeting as she processed the information. Oh my God, Bristol exclaimed, a smile of amusement playing on his lips. Now it's becoming clearer. What if Gordon paid Nara to pretend to be his wife until the company is handed over to him? Penelope stared at him, her mind racing as she absorbed the revelation. She remained silent, her gaze thoughtful and intense. Do you want to get the company? She finally asked, her voice carrying a steely resolve. Of course I do, Mum, Bristol replied, his determination evident. Then, Penelope's voice was commanding, you need to gather evidence that proves Gordon is not truly married to Nara. Bristol's eyes widened with the realization of what was now required of him. He knew he had a crucial task ahead. The gravity of the situation was clear, and he understood the path he must now take. Gordon pulled up to a stop in front of his villa, the vehicle's engine winding down as he got out, clutching the bag of medicine he had picked up at the drugstore. He turned to Nara, who was seated in the car, and handed her the bag with a gentle smile. Here, he said. Drink the medication and rest up. Stella will bring you something to eat. Thank you, Nara muttered, her voice tinged with a mixture of gratitude and lingering surprise. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had transpired last night. What had caused this sudden shift in Gordon's behavior? I'll be heading in now, Gordon said, turning to enter the villa. As he did, he encountered Stella in the hallway. What happened? You didn't come back last night. Is everything all right? Stella's voice was filled with concern, her eyes wide with alarm. You don't have to worry, everything is fine, Gordon reassured her. You're both giving me a heart attack, Stella exclaimed, her tone a mix of exasperation and relief. Gordon smiled at her, appreciating her genuine concern. Get someone to prepare something for Nara to eat. She's not feeling well. Not feeling well? Where is she? Stella's concern deepened. She's coming in, Gordon replied. You left her outside. Stella's eyes widened, and she gently pushed Gordon aside to check on Nara. Amused, Gordon watched Stella's hurried movements. He had always admired how Stella, when she took a liking to someone, would show unwavering care and affection. It was this very quality that had drawn him to her in the first place. He climbed the stairs to his room, shutting the door behind him. As he sat on the edge of the bed, he closed his eyes, letting the memories of the previous night flood his mind. He glanced down at his arm and saw the wound she had tenderly tended to. The recollection of her clumsy but endearing reactions as the wine took effect made him smile. He remembered how she had nearly toppled over, and how he had rushed to catch her before she fell. He smiled wider as he smiled more deeply as he recalled the tender morning moment when he had awoken before her. He remembered the serene beauty of her sleeping form, her breath steady and peaceful, a gentle rise and fall of her chest. The soft morning light cast a warm glow on her face, highlighting the delicate curve of her cheeks and the tranquil flutter of her eyelashes. He had been mesmerized by her beauty at that moment, yet instantly averted his gaze when her eyes began to stir. Her touch was a tender whisper against his skin as she reached out, her fingers brushing softly over his face. Suddenly he felt a tightening in his chest, a rapid, almost uncomfortable heartbeat. He placed a hand over his heart, the rhythm beating beneath his fingers. Was he falling in love with Nara Vespertine? The question echoed in his mind, a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. Penelope strode into the boutique with an air of commanding authority, flanked by her 2 bodyguards. She wore a white dress which was draped with a gray coat that spoke of luxury. Each step she took resonated with the sharp clack of her red Yves Saint Laurent heels, echoing through the boutique and capturing the attention of every onlooker. Heads turned, their gazes tracing her regal silhouette as she moved with an almost palpable aura of confidence. A female attendant, visibly awestruck, hurried towards her with a respectful bow. "Ma'am, we have been expecting you," she said, her voice tinged with reverence. Penelope's piercing gaze flickered momentarily towards the attendant before returning to the front with an unwavering focus. "Lead the way," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for hesitation. The attendant, adjusting her posture with practiced grace, turned and led the way. Penelope and her bodyguards followed, their presence a silent testament to her influence. When they reached the bag store, the room was a haven of high fashion, with designer bags meticulously arranged on polished shelves. The attendant's voice carried a note of pride as she informed Penelope, "We vacated everyone upon your arrival." Gesturing towards the empty store, Penelope's eyes, sharp and discerning, swept across the room as she inspected each piece. "This just came in yesterday," the attendant said, directing her attention to a silver purse adorned with diamond stones that glittered under the boutique's lights. Without a moment's pause, Penelope pointed decisively. "Take that, and that, and that, and that," she instructed, her voice firm and unyielding. The attendant, accustomed to such commands, nodded with practiced efficiency. She gestured to 2 other attendants standing nearby. "Wrap them up quickly," she ordered, her tone brooking no argument. Outside, Gwen, who had also been shopping in the boutique, caught sight of Penelope's commanding figure through the glass doors of the bag store. A sly smile curved her lips as she approached, her intent clear. "I think it's high time I finally met Penelope Antonov," she declared with an air of self-assuredness. However, Gwen's path was abruptly blocked by the 2 imposing bodyguards. "You will be let in once we are done here," one of them stated, his tone firm and unyielding. Gwen's eyes flashed with indignation as she retorted, "What do you mean by that?" The bodyguards remained stoic, their gazes fixed straight ahead, unwavering in their duty. Gwen's frustration grew palpable as she demanded, "I said let me in." From within the store, Penelope's keen senses picked up the disturbance. Emerging from the boutique, her gaze was immediately drawn to the commotion outside. She surveyed Gwen with a critical eye. "Didn't you make the announcement, or is she new here?" Penelope inquired, her voice icy and commanding as she addressed the attendant who had bowed in apology. "I'm sorry, ma'am, let me handle it." The attendant apologized and made an attempt to leave. "I will handle it myself," Penelope said, immediately cutting her off guard, and walked past her, heading towards the entrance. Gwen, unable to contain her amusement, burst into a hearty laugh. "So this is the almighty Penelope Antonov," she exclaimed, her voice rich of scorn. Penelope's eyes narrowed as she scrutinized Gwen's face, trying to place her. "Do I know you?" she asked, her tone edged with curiosity and suspicion. Gwen attempted to close the distance, but the guards blocked her path. "Let her in," Penelope ordered with a wave of her hand. The bodyguards parted, allowing Gwen to pass through. As Gwen stepped inside, Penelope's gaze remained fixed, her expression a mixture of intrigue and guarded wariness. "Who are you?" she demanded again, her voice cutting through the boutique's serene ambience like a blade. "Gwen Vespertine," Gwen replied defiantly, her voice sharp and unwavering, her tall, statuesque figure and intense gaze only added to the gravity of her words. Suddenly, Penelope burst into laughter. It was an unsettling, almost manic sound that drew the attention of everyone around. Her laughter was contagious and wild, causing heads to turn in their direction. "What's so funny?" Gwen demanded, her voice laced with a mix of anger and confusion. "So you're the mother of that twit," Penelope said with a mocking smile. Her eyes, sharp and gleaming with unrestrained amusement, reflected a disdainful glint. "How dare you call my daughter a twit?" Gwen shot back, her eyes narrowing into fierce slits as she glared at Penelope. Her tone was a blend of fury and disgust, her posture rigid and defiant. "Isn't that what she is? Now tell me, why have you come to see me?" Penelope's voice dripped with condescension, and her commanding presence was palpable. Her posture was regal, her demeanor unyielding, as though she were accustomed to being the center of attention. Gwen met Penelope's gaze with a steely determination. "I've heard a lot about you. I already know what kind of person you are." Penelope scoffed, her expression a mix of curiosity and irritation. "And what do they say I am?" Gwen hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with a mix of resolve and apprehension. "Well, I don't have time to waste on matters that aren't my concern. I'm just here to warn you." "Warn me?" Penelope's eyebrows arched, her interest piqued. "Yes," Gwen said firmly, "to never lay a hand on my daughter." Penelope cackled, a chilling sound that seemed to reverberate in the air. Her eyes sparkled with a malicious amusement. "You call that laying hands? Just wait and see what I do if she crosses me again." Gwen wasn't surprised by Penelope's reaction. She had heard about Penelope's notorious antics. She braced herself, knowing that Penelope was a force to be reckoned with. "I don't even know what my son sees in her," Penelope suddenly declared, her tone laced with scorn. Her eyes bore into Gwen with a dismissive glare. "Huh?" Gwen responded, her eyebrows arching in genuine surprise. "Yes, I can't fathom why my son is interested in her," Penelope said with a smirk, her disdain evident. "Wait a minute, you call that a son?" Gwen burst into laughter, her voice rich with scorn. "You call that a joke of a human being a son?" Penelope's eyes widened in shock, unprepared for Gwen's audacious comeback. Her mouth opened slightly in disbelief. "Now let me warn you again," Gwen said, her voice dripping with menace. "The next time you lay your filthy hands on my daughter, I will make sure to tear down everything you hold dear, including that joke you call a son." "What?" Penelope's voice was a mix of outrage and disbelief. "Now, if you'll excuse me," Gwen said with a dismissive wave, "I came here to shop for bags." She turned on her heel and strode past Penelope, heading into the upscale bag store with a sense of finality. Penelope watched Gwen leave, her face a mask of stunned anger. She couldn't believe that Gwen, of all people, had dared to confront her in such a manner. "Let's go," she said finally, a forced smile on her lips, trying to mask her irritation. As Gwen moved to the side and watched Penelope depart, her heartbeat still raced with adrenaline. She couldn't believe she had confronted the formidable wife of Jacob Antonov. Despite her anger, Gwen felt a burning resolve. "How dare she call my daughter a twit?" Gwen muttered to herself, her voice a low growl of anger. She felt a growing sense of determination to see her plans succeed, particularly her goal of making Gordon her son-in-law, no matter the cost. Jacob had just concluded a board meeting with his board members in his boardroom. Suddenly, he heard a knock at the door. He looked up from his mahogany desk. His secretary, a woman in her 30s with a professional demeanor and neatly styled hair, entered and bowed slightly. "What is it?" Jacob asked, his deep voice echoing slightly in the well-appointed room. "Sir, a man is outside in the waiting room waiting for you," she said, her tone respectful yet curious. "A man?" Jacob's eyebrows arched in curiosity. "Yes, he says he knows you," she replied innocently, her gaze steady. "Did he say his name?" "No, sir." Jacob pondered for a moment, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. "I don't think I'm expecting anyone today. Should I send him away, sir?" "Pack up these files," Jacob ordered, standing up and gesturing to the scattered documents on his desk. His tall, commanding figure moved with a decisive grace. "Okay, sir," the secretary replied, her efficient movements reflecting years of experience. She began organizing the files with practiced speed. "After you're done, send him over to my office," Jacob instructed, his mind already occupied with thoughts of the unexpected visitor. Jacob walked out of the meeting room and headed straight to his office in anticipation of whom the visitor might be. A knock on the office door startled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he said, his authoritative voice steady. The door opened to reveal a man who was Jacob's age, with a distinguished appearance. Peter, dressed in a sharp black Italian suit that accentuated his refined taste, walked in with a broad, genuine smile. His presence was both commanding and warm. "Peter," Jacob exclaimed, his face lighting up with genuine excitement. He stood up and moved to embrace Peter, his broad shoulders and strong frame evident as he did. "Hey, Jacob," Peter said, returning the embrace with a friendly grip and an easygoing smile. "You didn't tell me you were back in the country," Jacob remarked as they broke apart. "Well, I decided to surprise you," Peter said with a hearty laugh that filled the room. "You could have told my secretary who you were. Why did you have her keep you in the waiting room?" "Oh, that," Peter said with a dismissive wave. She seemed new. "I didn't want to overwhelm her." Come and have a seat," Jacob said, gesturing to a plush sofa in the middle of his office. The office was a symbol of Jacob's success, with its elegant furnishings and panoramic views of the city. Peter, Jacob's best friend since childhood and his best man at his first wedding, took a seat with ease. Peter had been living abroad for 10 years, and his return was a significant event for Jacob. "You look good," Jacob said, admiring Peter's well-maintained appearance. "Miriam must be taking good care of you." Miriam, Peter's wife, was known for her elegance and poise. Peter laughed heartily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You've come again with your jokes, eh?" "Well, you're not looking bad yourself," he added, grinning at Jacob, whose face was relaxed and happy. "Speaking of Miriam, how is she? It's been ages since I last saw her." "She's fine," Peter said, his voice softening. "Ever since the death of our only child, she's been quite depressed, but we're still seeking help." His expression turned somber, reflecting the weight of his words. Jacob's face mirrored Peter's sadness, and he offered a heartfelt, "I'm so sorry about that." "So, are you back for good?" Jacob asked, trying to shift the conversation to a more positive note. Something like that," Peter replied with a hint of mystery. Jacob's eyes widened with anticipation. "Finally, we can go on our fishing trips again," he said, a broad smile spreading across his face. Peter laughed. "You've really missed that, haven't you?" "Of course," Jacob said enthusiastically. "Lest I forget, how's the family? How's my godson?" "It's been ages since I saw him," Peter inquired eagerly. "Oh, you won't believe it. Gordon is married," Jacob said, his face alight with pride. "What? How? When? Why didn't I get the memo?" Peter's surprise was evident, his eyes widening. "I'm as shocked as you are. He came back from abroad and suddenly announced he was married." "This is good news," Peter exclaimed joyfully. "You should see his wife. She's absolutely beautiful," Jacob added with a smile. "Really? That means I'll be visiting the mansion soon," Peter said, his smile widening. "Is he still at loggerheads with Penelope and Briston?" Jacob asked, adjusting himself in his chair, which was upholstered in rich leather. Jacob's smile grew as he spoke. "You know Gordon, he's never liked them, and I don't think he ever will. This is serious. I actually thought it was a phase and it would pass with time. You know Gordon is just like me. When we set our minds on something, we follow through," Jacob said with a chuckle. Peter laughed heartily. "He really took after you. Well, that's by the way. I'm so happy Gordon is finally back home and married. I can finally hand over the company to him," Jacob said with a sense of accomplishment. "You're retiring?" Peter asked, his expression shifting to concern. Yes, indeed. I'll be passing everything to Gordon soon, Jacob confirmed. Peter straightened, his worry evident. Do Penelope and Briston know about this? Whether I tell them or not, they don't have a say in this matter, Jacob replied firmly. Don't you think this will cause a hassle? Gordon is my first son and the heir to my company. I don't see any issue with passing it on to him. I have a bad feeling about this, Peter said, his voice tinged with unease. Jacob burst into laughter, his eyes catching the glint of a bottle of whiskey on his wine shelf. He stood up, opened the shelf, and retrieved the bottle along with 2 glasses. Whiskey? He offered, his mood lightened by the familiar ritual. Peter looked at him with a smile, realizing that whatever the Antonovs set their minds to, they truly did achieve. Nara's phone rang insistently, pulling her from a deep slumber. Groggy and disoriented, she fumbled on the expansive bed, her hands flailing in search of the ringing device. When she finally grasped it, the caller ID displayed Elena. With a sleepy mumble, she answered, "Hello? Where have you been? I've been calling for ages." Elena's voice was sharp with frustration, but carried an undertone of relief. Nara squinted at her phone, seeing a string of missed calls from Elena. "Really? I'm so sorry I was asleep." Elena's voice brightened with the news. "Oh well, I'm back in the country." "What?" Nara's voice shot up in surprise, her sleepiness evaporating instantly. She sat up in bed, her heart racing with excitement. "You're back? Oh my God, I'm so happy. Yes, I'm back. I'm coming over to your place so we can catch up. You know we have a lot to talk about." "My place?" Nara's joy dimmed slightly as she remembered she hadn't told Elena she had moved. "Yes, your place," Elena confirmed, her tone expectant. Nara hesitated, realizing the oversight. "Actually, I don't live there anymore." Elena's confusion was palpable. "Huh? You know what, let's meet at your place then, we can talk there." "Okay, fine," Elena agreed, her voice softening. "I'll be expecting you." As the call ended, Nara sighed with a mix of relief and contentment. Elena had always been her rock, her source of strength and solace. The thought of finally having her back was a balm to her weary spirit. Nara lay back down, her face lit with a genuine smile as she closed her eyes, dreaming of their upcoming reunion. Suddenly, her phone chimed twice, pulling her from her reverie. She grabbed it, her heart leaping as she saw an email from Dynasty Modeling Agency. Her pulse quickened. Why would they be contacting her? With a deep breath, she opened the email. Her eyes widened in shock as she read the contents. A broad smile spread across her face, her excitement bubbling over. She squealed in delight, a sound so loud it sent the birds outside her window fluttering in alarm. Bursting with happiness, Nara leaped out of bed, her joy infectious. At that moment, Gordon burst into the room, his face etched with worry, trying to make sense of the commotion. "What's the problem? Are you okay?" Gordon's voice was laced with concern as he entered the room, his eyes widening in shock as Nara ran to him and enveloped him in a tight embrace. Nara's enthusiasm was palpable, but Gordon's surprise was clear. "What's wrong? Is everything all right?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Breaking free from the hug, Nara looked at him with sparkling eyes. "You won't believe it, I was just accepted into Dynasty." Her voice trembled with excitement. "Dynasty?" Gordon repeated, processing the news. "Yes, the modeling agency. It's been my lifelong dream." Nara's face was aglow with sheer joy, her eyes brimming with tears of happiness. Gordon's heart swelled with pride. He had secretly used his connections to help Nara get into Dynasty, and seeing her so ecstatic made him glad he had done so. He was about to reveal his part in the achievement, but hesitated, unsure if she might be upset or refuse the offer if she knew. Deciding to keep his involvement a secret, he simply smiled. "Wow, I'm so happy for you," he said, his voice sincere. "They want me to come today to sign the contract." Nara's excitement was contagious, her joy evident in every word. "Congratulations, Miss Vespertine," Gordon said warmly, his smile genuine. Thank you. Nara's exuberance was uncontainable. She beamed from ear to ear, and Gordon was charmed by her radiant smile. It was the brightest he had ever seen her, and it filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. "I'll be downstairs," Gordon said, turning towards the door. "Come down for breakfast when you're ready." As he closed the door behind him, Gordon couldn't help but smile and chuckle softly. Seeing Nara's smile made his heart flutter. Meanwhile, Nara picked up her phone to share the joyous news with Andrew and Elena but hesitated. She decided it would be more meaningful to tell them in person. Setting her phone down, she hurried into the bathroom to prepare for the day. Standing in front of the mirror in her pajamas, she suddenly realized the awkwardness of her earlier embrace with Gordon. The embarrassment hit her like a wave. "Ah!" she cried out, mortified, before rushing to the shower, her cheeks flushed with a mix of excitement and humiliation. Nara descended the stairs, her vibrant energy palpable. She wore black jeans that complemented her figure, a vintage top, and sleek black high heels that accentuated her grace. Her long black hair cascaded down her back, adding to her confident appearance. The morning sun seemed to reflect her mood, bright and optimistic. "You're here, finally," Gordon greeted her. Nara quickly pulled out a chair, hurriedly ignoring him. "Good morning, Stella," Nara said warmly, her eyes avoiding Gordon's as she took her seat. She still felt a twinge of embarrassment from their earlier hug. Stella, busy arranging the breakfast spread, looked up and noticed Nara's radiant demeanor. "You're looking so cheerful this morning." Nara's eyes sparkled with joy. "Yes, I woke up with some great news." "Good news?" Stella inquired, intrigued. "Have you heard of Dynasty Agency?" Nara's excitement was barely contained. Stella's eyes widened. "Dynasty? Isn't that the agency Gordon's family?" Gordon quickly interjected, his gaze firmly meeting Stella's to signal her to keep quiet about their connection to Dynasty. "Stella, pass me the coffee pot," he said, his tone firm yet controlled. Understanding his silent cue, Stella shifted her focus. "My dear, what's happened with Dynasty?" Nara's face lit up. "You know, I've always dreamed of being with that agency, and today, they emailed me. They want to sign me." "Wow, that's incredible news." Stella's face beamed with genuine happiness. "Yes, I'm over the moon. I've waited so long for this," Nara exclaimed, her joy unmistakable. "Congratulations, my dear," Stella said, her smile warm and sincere. Nara nodded gratefully, her excitement evident as she quickly began eating, savoring the fried eggs and bacon. "I need to hurry. I don't want to be late," she said between bites. "Take it easy, though," Stella advised, her tone gentle. "You don't want to choke." Nara hurriedly ate her breakfast, and Stella, taking a seat beside her, poured a cup of coffee and handed it to her. "Thank you," Nara muttered, gulping down the coffee with a swift motion. Stella watched with a smile, her heart warming at the sight of Nara's happiness. The house had felt tense and cold in recent days, but Nara's bright spirit brought a sense of normalcy and hope. Stella silently wished for this newfound joy to last, hoping the warmth in the home would remain for a long time. "Thank you for the meal, Stella. I need to get going now," Nara said, her voice tinged with urgency. "Now?" Stella's surprise was obvious. "Yes, I need to be there on time," Nara replied, her excitement barely contained. "Don't worry, I'll take you," Gordon offered, his voice firm. "Huh?" Nara's eyes widened in surprise, mirroring Stella's astonishment. Gordon's offer was unexpected, and Stella turned to look at him, curious about his sudden change in behavior. "I said I'd take you. Finish your meal," Gordon insisted, his tone brooking no argument. "Don't you have other important things to do?" Nara interjected, her surprise palpable. Gordon's gaze hardened slightly. "Well, if you don't want me to, the driver can take you," he said sharply. "Okay then, bye, Stella," Nara said quickly before rushing outside. Stella turned to Gordon, a knowing smile on her lips. What's with that look?" she asked playfully. Gordon avoided her gaze, fidgeting with his fork. "Since when did you start driving Nara around?" Stella pressed, her smile widening. "It's not what you think," Gordon replied nervously, pushing his eggs around on his plate. "Then what is it?" Stella pressed on, still smiling. "Ah, Stella, stop looking at me like that," Gordon said, feeling flustered. "Like what?" Stella asked innocently. "Didn't you tell me to be nice to her? That's exactly what I'm doing," Gordon said, trying to deflect. "It sure doesn't look like that to me," Stella teased, her smile broadening. Gordon met her gaze with a rueful smile. "So when do you plan on telling her about the part you played in getting her into Dynasty?" Stella asked. Gordon set his fork down, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I think I'll hold off for now," he said, a touch of hesitation in his voice. "Why? You need to tell her," Stella insisted. No, Stella. I don't want her to feel like she didn't achieve this on her own. Can't you see how thrilled she is? Gordon's voice was filled with concern. You're right, Stella conceded, her smile softening as she thought of Nara's happiness. She looks so happy this morning. Gordon nodded, his gaze filled with affection for Nara's joy. The car came to a stop in front of Dynasty Modeling Agency, a towering skyscraper with a sleek glass facade. The name Dynasty was emblazoned across the top, glowing softly in the morning light. Nara's heart raced with excitement as she stepped out of the car, her lifelong dream now within reach. She took a deep breath of the city air and entered the building, her anticipation building. Wait here, Nara ordered her bodyguard, who had started to follow her. As she reached the entrance, 2 security guards stepped in her path, blocking her way. Their stern expressions and rigid postures were a clear indication of their authority. Just then, another security guard appeared, his demeanor confident and assertive. Let her through, he ordered firmly, his voice carrying authority. She's with the director. The 2 security guards exchanged quick, uncertain glances before stepping aside, allowing Nara to pass. Inside, the grandeur matched her expectations. The lobby was pristine, with a vast display showcasing photographs of Dynasty's top models. Among them was a striking image of Yvonne, her sister. Nara paused, admiring the familiar face and feeling a pang of longing to see her own picture among these icons. Nara? A familiar voice called out. Nara turned to see Yvonne approaching, flanked by her manager. The sight of her sister brought an immediate rush of irritation. What are you doing here? Yvonne snapped, her tone sharp as she neared. How is that any of your business? Nara shot back, trying to keep her composure. Seriously, how did you even get in? These days the security lets anyone in. Yvonne sneered, her eyes appraising Nara with disdain. Look, Yvonne, I don't have time for this, Nara replied, her patience wearing thin. Yvonne burst into laughter, her tone mocking. So you think just because you're now an Antonov you're on my level? Nara glared at her sister, still baffled by Yvonne's relentless need for conflict. You know what? I think I should get going, she said, turning to leave. Before she could take a step, Yvonne's manager grabbed her arm. Ouch! Let me go! Nara protested. Yvonne's anger flared. You think you can just waltz in here? What are you doing at Dynasty? She demanded. Nara tried to pull away. Look, I don't have time for this, she repeated. Yvonne's frustration boiled over. Since you're not speaking, get security, she yelled, gesturing to a nearby security guard. The guard approached, his demeanor nervous. Yes, ma'am? Did you let this person in? Yvonne's voice was cold and accusatory. Yes, ma'am, the guard replied, visibly uncomfortable. Why? Don't you realize this is a high-profile establishment? Yvonne continued, her tone harsh. Ma'am, the order from above. Forget the orders, get her out of here. Yvonne cut him off, her voice firm. Huh? Get her out, now! Yvonne's command was unyielding. The security guard hesitated, but before he could respond, the company's director appeared, his presence commanding immediate respect. Mrs. Antonov, we've been expecting you, he said, addressing Nara with a respectful nod. Yvonne's eyes widened in shock when the director greeted Nara. Her manager Grace slowly let go of Nara's arm. Huh? Yvonne exclaimed, her voice a mix of surprise and disbelief. Oh, Yvonne, I see you've met our newest cine, the director said with a smug smile. Newest what? Yvonne's voice was sharp with incredulity. The director, a tall man with a well-groomed beard and an air of authority, smiled warmly at Nara. Nara, I hope we didn't keep you waiting. I asked the security man to take you upstairs, but I think he misunderstood me. Oh, not to worry. Yvonne here was already directing me, Nara said, turning toward Yvonne with a smile that barely concealed her sarcasm. The director motioned towards the elevator. Well, let's head up to my office. Nara looked back at Yvonne, offering a parting smile and a sarcastic bye, Yvonne, before stepping into the elevator. The doors closed, leaving Yvonne stunned, her face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief as she watched them ascend. What did I just hear? Yvonne demanded of Grace, her voice trembling with emotion. I think the director just said that your sister is now signed with Dynasty, Grace stammered, trying to avoid Yvonne's furious gaze. I heard that right, you dummy, Yvonne snapped. You told me to tell you. Grace began to explain, but Yvonne cut her off. Grace, I said shut up, Yvonne snapped, her anger boiling over. Grace flinched, backing away slightly in response. Yvonne clenched her fists, struggling to contain her fury. With a final glare at the now empty elevator, she stormed out of the building, her manager trailing behind her, trying to keep pace. Have a seat, the director said, ushering Nara into a plush armchair in his opulently decorated office. The name Dynasty Agency was stylishly emblazoned on the wall behind him. Nara nervously sank into the seat, her eyes taking in the luxurious surroundings, the rich mahogany desk, the velvet curtains, and the exquisite artwork that adorned the walls. You can call me Harry, he said, settling into a leather chair opposite Nara. His striking features were hard to ignore, tall and handsome with a well-groomed beard and deep-set, intense eyes that conveyed both authority and charm. The subtle yet captivating scent of his cologne seemed to linger in the room, adding an extra layer of sophistication. So, Mrs. Antonov. You can just call me Nara, she interjected, feeling uncomfortable with the formal address. Okay, Harry replied, his warm smile easing the tension. How do you feel about being signed on to Dynasty? Nara's face lit up with a broad, genuine smile. I'm so excited. I've always wanted to work with this establishment, and I'm thrilled to finally be here. Really? Then you must be quite fortunate. After we saw you walk at our last event, the board of directors had a meeting and decided to bring you in. Nara's eyes widened in disbelief, her excitement bubbling over. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Harry's smile broadened. We're grateful to have someone like you. You know what? Harry continued. We'll notify you of the date to officially sign with us. The press will be there, so be ready. Oh, okay. That's not a problem, Nara responded, her smile unwavering. Well then, see you soon, Harry said, standing up and extending his hand towards Nara. She rose and shook his hand firmly. Welcome to Dynasty Agency once again, he said warmly. Thank you, Nara replied, turning to leave. As she closed the door behind her, Harry exhaled deeply, a knowing smile creeping onto his face. He sat back down and picked up his phone, dialing a number. Your wife just left, Harry announced when the call was answered. I hope you didn't mention the role I played in this, Gordon's voice asked, tinged with concern. Oh, I didn't. You told me to keep it a secret, Harry assured him. Good. That's all right. Okay, talk to you later if anything else comes up, Harry said before ending the call. He began tapping his fingers lightly on the desk, his smile growing increasingly cunning. So Gordon had a wife as beautiful as this and kept it a secret, he mused, his eyes gleaming with intrigue. Well, Nara, welcome to Dynasty Agency, he said, his laughter resonating with a mix of mischief. Nara walked out of the Dynasty Agency, her face beaming with elation. Her joy was palpable as she quickly slid into the sleek interior of her car. With a burst of excitement, she grabbed her phone and dialed Elena's number. You won't believe what just happened, she exclaimed as soon as Elena answered. With the way you're sounding, I'm guessing something huge happened? Elena suggested, her curiosity piqued. You won't believe it, I still think I'm dreaming. This must be huge. Tell me, what happened? Elena urged, her voice brimming with anticipation. You know what, I'm heading to your place right now. I'll fill you in when I get there. Elena chuckled. Can't wait for this exciting news. I'm already on my way. Bye, Nara said, ending the call with a cheerful click. She reclined in the plush car seat, closing her eyes and letting out a contented sigh. Nara's heart raced with excitement and disbelief as she reflected on the extraordinary turn of events. Her dreams were finally coming true, and the reality of it all still felt surreal. Edward Vespertine had just concluded a consultation with the family doctor. As he settled into a comfortable armchair in the living room, Gwen entered, her face etched with concern. Doctor, how is he? She inquired, her voice laced with worry. The doctor, a distinguished man with silver hair and a reassuring demeanor, responded, Oh, nothing to worry about. He just needs enough rest and should avoid strenuous activities. Only that? Gwen asked, her eyebrows knitting together. Yes, that will be all, the doctor confirmed with a nod. Edward interjected, a hint of exasperation in his voice. You see, I've been trying to tell her that I'm all right, but she still insists I get checked up by you. Gwen shot him a sharp look. Oh, don't give me that. Haven't you noticed how lost in thought you've been lately? It can affect your health, she retorted. The doctor chuckled at their playful bickering. You don't need to worry too much. He just needs to rest, take his medications on time, and try to think less. Okay, doctor. Thank you very much, Gwen said, her expression softening with gratitude. I'll be on my way now, the doctor said, packing his equipment into his leather suitcase. Okay then, have a nice day, Edward said, offering a polite farewell. Once the doctor had left, Gwen immediately turned to Edward sitting down beside him on the plush sofa. You heard what the doctor said, right? She asked, her tone firm. Edward nodded, though his response seemed more like a gesture for her to drop the subject. Gwen, has Nara given you any feedback about the marriage issue? Edward asked, a note of frustration in his voice. Nara, again, Gwen snapped, her irritation evident. Why are you so obsessed with her lately? You're losing sleep and spending most of your time brooding. Edward remained silent, visibly disinterested in Gwen's nagging. When he didn't respond, Gwen decided to break the silence. Well, the marriage was true. Nara and Gordon were actually married, she revealed, her tone betraying a hint of satisfaction. Edward's eyes widened, and his face lit up with an excited smile. Are you serious? Yes, of course. Why are you so excited about this news? Edward looked at Gwen, weighing whether to reveal his plans or keep them to himself. Ultimately, he chose to share, recognizing that Gwen would play a significant role. You know, lately we've been facing a lot of issues with our investors. So, how does Nara's marriage to Gordon relate to this? Gwen asked, puzzled. Edward cleared his throat, his voice steady and calculated. Now that she's married to Gordon, he'll be taking over the company eventually. Don't you think we'll need the Antonovs to invest? Once other investors see that the Antonovs are on board, they'll be less likely to pull out their money. The revelation hit Gwen like a slap to the face. The idea of relying on Nara for anything was unsettling to her. What kind of joke is this? She exclaimed, standing up in shock. Calm down, Gwen. This is a significant opportunity for us, Edward said, trying to placate her. What kind of opportunity? Don't you think Briston could also make a difference since he's marrying Yvonne? Edward laughed, a hint of derision in his tone. We all know the real power and influence lie with Jacob Antonov and Gordon. Briston doesn't hold any weight? Despite her disbelief, Gwen began to see the validity in Edward's argument. She had to admit that his reasoning made sense. Now what makes you think Nara would agree to this? She asked, her face etched with irritation. Edward relaxed into his chair, a satisfied smile on his lips. Well, that shouldn't be a problem. She doesn't have much choice, does she? After all, she owes us for the way her mother dumped her here before she died. Gwen's eyes narrowed and she laughed sarcastically. Need I remind you that that so-called useless mother was once your lover? Let's not revisit that now, Edward said, his tone dismissive as he tried to steer the conversation away from the uncomfortable topic. Gwen, still fuming, suddenly had a mischievous glint in her eye. She leaned in closer to Edward, her anger giving way to a scheming smile. What's with the smile? Edward asked, his suspicion evident. Gwen sat back down beside him, her demeanor now one of cunning resolve. You're right, I have a plan. A plan? Edward echoed, intrigued. Yes. Why don't we invite Gordon and Nara over for dinner? Dinner? Edward repeated, considering the suggestion. Yes, of course. We need to get acquainted with Gordon before we execute our plans, Gwen explained, her smile widening. As Edward processed Gwen's suggestion, he began nodding slowly. I think you're right, he said, returning her smile with one of his own. I'm always right, she declared, a self-satisfied smile on her face. Okay then, get Yvonne to inform Nara, Edward instructed. Okay, dear, she replied with a nod. Edward sighed in contentment, feeling as though a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He stood up and stretched, preparing to head upstairs for some much-needed rest. Gwen, observing him leave, wore a mischievous grin. Her plans were finally falling into place. Mom! Yvonne's angry shout pierced through Gwen's thoughts, jolting her from her reverie. In here, Gwen responded, her voice tired but tinged with curiosity. Yvonne stormed into the living room, her frustration evident in her stride. She flopped onto a large, cushioned sofa with an exasperated huff. Mom, you won't believe what just happened, she announced. What now? Gwen asked wearily, her patience wearing thin. It's Nara. Gwen's irritation gave way to surprise. What's with everyone and Nara today? Nara here, Nara there, ah, she exclaimed, her tone a mix of exasperation and disbelief. Mom, Nara just got signed to Dynasty. What? Gwen's eyes widened in shock. Yes, Mom. Gwen sank back into her seat, her face clouding with suspicion. I'm sure Gordon has a hand in this, she mused aloud. Mom, it's not fair, Yvonne protested, her voice cracking with frustration. Shut up and stop complaining, Gwen snapped sharply. Yvonne fell silent, her mouth closing as she struggled to find words. Well, you don't need to worry. I have a plan, Gwen announced, her voice taking on a cunning edge. Yvonne's eyes widened with interest. A plan? Yes. But you'll need to invite Nara and Gordon over for dinner. What? What kind of stupid plan is that? Yvonne shot back, her skepticism obvious. Calm down and listen, Gwen demanded, her tone firm. Have you ever had a conversation with Gordon before? How do you expect to get close to him? Look, this dinner is your best chance to make a move. Yvonne started to reconsider, her initial resistance softening as she pondered her mother's words. Well, okay, I see your point, she conceded slowly. Exactly, Gwen said with a sly smile. At dinner, I'll keep Nara occupied, giving you the opportunity to focus on Gordon. Yvonne's face lit up with excitement. Oh my God, Mom, that's an excellent plan. Gwen's smile widened as she relished the unfolding scheme. Now all you need to do is call Nara and let her know about the dinner. Yvonne grinned, eager for her chance to win over Gordon. Elena peered out her window, her eyes widening in astonishment as a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of her house. Her curiosity was piqued as she saw Nara stepping out of the vehicle, the bodyguard holding the door open for her. Elena couldn't believe her eyes. Nara had transformed so dramatically, she looked so different from the last time she had seen her. The changes were striking, and Elena felt a surge of excitement as she rushed outside. Nara! Elena shouted joyfully, her voice filled with enthusiasm. Nara's gaze shifted to Elena, and with a beaming smile she hurried towards her friend. They embraced tightly, their hug warm and full of emotion. I've missed you, Nara said, tears of happiness shimmering in her eyes as they pulled apart. Come here, Elena said, pulling Nara in for another heartfelt hug. I've missed you too, she whispered softly. Both women sighed with relief as they separated, the reunion bringing immense joy to both. Nara seemed genuinely pleased to be seeing Elena. Finally, she would see a familiar face to run to whenever she was sad and needed to vent out all her problems. Elena then gestured towards the bodyguard and the SUV, curiosity evident in her voice. Whose are those? She asked, pointing at the bodyguard. Nara glanced back with a smile. You know what? Let's go inside and talk, she said, guiding Elena towards the front door. As they entered, Elena's home revealed itself as a beautifully decorated space, painted in soft pink tones. The walls were adorned with elegant silhouette pictures, adding a sophisticated touch to the decor. Nara collapsed onto the plush sofa with a contented sigh, her hands running over the soft fabric as if savoring the comfort. The decor was meticulously curated, with sophisticated silhouette artwork framed in gold and hanging gracefully on the walls, adding a touch of classic charm. The living area featured a plush, overstuffed sofa in a delicate pastel shade, its luxurious fabric inviting relaxation. Soft flowing drapes framed the windows, allowing streams of natural light to filter through and highlight the room's subtle glamour. Elegant throw pillows in various textures and patterns were scattered across the sofa, enhancing the cozy feminine aesthetic. Delicate floral arrangements and tasteful accents adorned the coffee table, completing the space with a refined touch. Elena had clearly put a lot of effort into decorating her space. It's been a while since I visited here, Nara said, her voice filled with nostalgia. Elena took a seat beside her, the comfort of the sofa evident in their relaxed postures. So, how was your trip and work? Nara asked, her curiosity piqued. Elena settled onto the sofa, her expression brightening. It went well. We managed to train the models effectively, though it wasn't easy. The shoot was intense. Imagine doing it in the snow with inexperienced models. We had to work incredibly hard to get everything just right. Yeah, Nara said with a knowing smile. But I'm so glad you're back. You've lost quite a bit of weight. Elena smiled, rolling her eyes playfully. Enough about me. Tell me how all this happened, she said, gesturing towards the luxury and changes visible around them. That's all, Gordon. Nara said reluctantly, her tone laced with a hint of annoyance. Oh my God, Elena's exclamation of surprise echoed through the room. What's the shout for? You know, I think he did that just to keep an eye on me, Nara said, her voice carrying a trace of frustration. Elena chuckled, shaking her head. I disagree. I think it's just one of the perks of being a billionaire's wife. Nara shot her a playful but sharp look. So, when am I meeting him? Meeting who? Gordon, of course. Nara hesitated, then replied, Why do you want to meet him? He's not that interesting. We barely talk at home. That's none of my business. I still need to meet my best friend's husband. You must be joking, Nara said, bursting into laughter, which soon had Elena joining in. You know, you've changed a lot, Elena said, scrutinizing Nara's appearance. She noticed the vintage shirt that gave off an air of sophistication, the well-fitted jeans, and couldn't help but admire the elegant shoes. Changed? How do you mean changed? Nara asked, puzzled. You just look different. In a strikingly good way, Elena said, her smile wide and sincere. Nara chuckled. You've come again with your jokes. I'm serious, Nara. You look different from the last time I saw you. Well? I think something is actually wrong with your brain, Nara said, laughing heartily. That reminded Elena of a question she had been meaning to ask. By the way, why aren't you at your place anymore? She asked, once Nara's laughter had subsided. Well, about that, Gordon insisted I move into his place. Huh? Don't tell me you two are living together now. Yes, we are, and you share the same. Oh, shut up, Lena, Nara snapped, noticing Elena's mischievous expression. We stay in separate rooms, silly. Elena burst into laughter, her amusement evident. You know, your situation is the funniest thing I've ever heard. Nara sighed, sinking deeper into the sofa. You know me too well. Sometimes it feels like I'm living in a dream. Elena turned to face her fully, curiosity etched across her features. How does it feel? She asked, her eyes wide with interest. Nara looked at her skeptically. How does that feel? How does it feel being married to Gordon? How else am I supposed to feel? How does one feel being married to someone they don't know at all, and with whom they don't even have the slightest emotional connection? Geez, Nara, it's not that bad. You're not the one in my shoes, Nara snapped, her frustration evident. Elena rolled her eyes and stood up, moving to her wine shelf. She retrieved a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. Pouring wine into each glass, she handed one to Nara and took a seat beside her. Don't worry, Elena said reassuringly. Everything will be fine. Before you even know it, a year will have passed. Nara took a grateful sip from her glass, appreciating the gesture. Thank you, she said softly. But you know, I haven't heard you complain about Gordon being unbearable lately, Elena said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Nara shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Elena's intense gaze. Or is he no longer unbearable? Elena prodded, her tone playful. Well, lately he's changed. Ever since when? Elena's eyes widened, her curiosity clearly piqued. She leaned in, eager to hear more. Nara hesitated, her mind racing as she considered whether to share details about that night Gordon had accompanied her to fetch her alarm clock. Ultimately, she decided against it, unsure of what had really transpired. Never mind, she said, taking another sip of her wine. Elena's eyes sparkled with mischief as she leaned closer. Or, do you think he might be falling for you? Nara sputtered, wine spilling from her mouth in surprise. She glanced at Elena, who was laughing heartily at her reaction. You know, you joke a lot, Nara said with a smile, though her eyes still held a hint of vulnerability. Don't mind me, Elena said, her expression shifting to seriousness. How is Andrew? She asked gently, her concern obvious. Nara sighed deeply, her face showing the strain of her situation. He's fine. I know it's tough on him, but we're going to get through it together. Elena set her glass down on the table and moved closer to Nara. She opened her arms in a gesture of comfort. Come here, she said softly, inviting Nara into a hug. Nara looked at her friend, a warm smile spreading across her face. It was exactly the reassurance she needed. She leaned into Elena's embrace, feeling a wave of relief as Elena patted her on the back. Everything is going to be all right, Elena whispered soothingly. Are you sure? Nara asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I promise, Elena said firmly, her tone filled with conviction. Everything will be okay eventually. Nara's face lit up with a radiant smile, She pulled back slightly from their embrace and looked at Elena with gleaming eyes. Guess what? Elena chuckled, playing along. What? Guess, silly. You know I'm not very good at guessing. Nara shifted in her seat, holding Elena's hands and gazing at her with a bright, infectious grin. You're speaking to the newest cine for Dynasty Agency. Elena's eyes widened in disbelief. Oh my God, tell me that's a joke. It's not, Nara replied with a chuckle, her excitement palpable. How? How did it happen? Elena asked, her voice tinged with awe. This morning, Nara exclaimed happily, her joy evident in her expression. I'm so happy for you, Elena said, gripping Nara's hands tightly. I know how hard you've worked to get into Dynasty, she continued, her voice filled with genuine pride. I could hardly believe it when I found out, Nara admitted, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. You earned it, Elena reassured her. After your stunning walk at their last runway event, didn't I tell you that you would get picked? Oh yes, you did, but I thought it was just a joke, Nara said, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. Tell me, how did it happen? Well, this morning after you called, I received an email from Dynasty saying that they wanted to sign me. Don't you think Gordon might be your good luck charm? Elena suggested playfully. Nara burst into laughter. Why did you say that? Isn't it obvious? Ever since he came into your life, you've changed so much and now you're finally in Dynasty. Wouldn't you call that a coincidence? Come on, Lena, those are just coincidences, Nara said, shaking her head but still smiling. Well, I don't think so, Elena teased. I can't wait for Yvonne to hear the news, Elena said with a mischievous glint in her eye. I actually met her today, Nara revealed. Really? Yes, at Dynasty. You should have seen her face when she heard the news. I bet she was so furious her eyes began to twitch, Elena guessed. Yes, Nara confirmed, and both friends erupted into laughter, their shared joy lighting up the room. If Yvonne's face was like that, I can only imagine the look on Gwen's face, Elena remarked, amidst laughter. Thank you for always being there for me, Lena, Nara said softly, her voice tinged with sincere gratitude. She looked at Elena with warm, expressive eyes, her smile a mixture of appreciation and warmth. You know, I wouldn't even know what I would have done without your support. Thank you so much. Elena's gaze faltered slightly, a flicker of envy crossing her eyes as she looked at Nara. Despite her calm exterior, a storm of longing brewed within her. Nara seemed to glide through life effortlessly, blessed with beauty and opportunities that Elena had only ever dreamed of. Elena had struggled tirelessly, her own desires always just out of reach. She had always yearned for a life like Nara's, especially for a billionaire husband, but it felt like an elusive fantasy compared to Nara's seemingly effortless charm. Elena's voice was barely a whisper as she muttered to herself, You don't know what I would give to be in your shoes, Nara. Nara's eyes sharpened with curiosity. What did you say? Elena quickly masked her feelings, her face brightening with a practiced smile. Oh, nothing, she said, her tone light as she reached out. She picked up Nara's wine glass, which was already half empty, and handed it to her with a delicate grace. To friendship, Elena said. Lifting her glass in a gesture of camaraderie, she met Nara's gaze with a hopeful glint in her eyes. No, Nara replied, her smile widening with genuine affection. To sisters. Elena's heart ached as she echoed the sentiment, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. To sisters, she said, clinking her glass against Nara's, the sound of their glasses mingling as she grappled with the pang of envy that lingered beneath the surface. A knock on the door to his study startled Gordon, his eyes fixed intently on his laptop screen. Come in, he said, glancing up as the door opened. Jeffrey entered carrying a briefcase and a purposeful stride. Jeffrey, I wasn't expecting you till evening, Gordon said, closing his laptop and looking up with a mix of surprise and curiosity. I finished preparing the documents and decided to bring them to you, Jeffrey replied, opening his briefcase with a smooth, practiced motion. He retrieved a blue file and handed it over to Gordon. Gordon took the file and flipped it open, his gaze scanning each page with meticulous attention. Your signature is the only thing needed before we can begin construction, Jeffrey explained, watching Gordon closely. Do you think this project will work? Gordon asked, his focus still on the document. Of course, sir. I've calculated the odds and done a statistical analysis of the potential damage. I believe your profit will remain intact, Jeffrey assured him. Gordon leaned back in his seat, still absorbed in the redevelopment document. He had plans to acquire land on the outskirts of town to build a shopping mall. The papers in his hands contained the signatures of every resident of the building set for demolition. All right then, Gordon said, reaching for a pen and signing the document with a decisive stroke. Here, he said, passing the papers back to Jeffrey. Jeffrey took the documents and neatly arranged them back into his briefcase. That reminds me, sir, I have news, he said almost immediately. News? Gordon asked, intrigued. Yes, news about you and Nara's marriage, Jeffrey continued, his tone revealing a hint of anticipation. Gordon's eyes widened. He had actually tasked Jeffrey with finding out more about the details of their marriage. Okay, I'm listening, Gordon said, leaning forward. I found the church where you both got married, Jeffrey revealed, his tone suggesting that this information was more significant than just a simple detail. The church? Gordon echoed, his interest piqued. Yes, but it's no longer a church. I found the priest at that time, Jeffrey said. Really? Then why don't I have any recollection of this? Gordon asked, puzzled. Because both of you were drunk, Jeffrey replied. Drunk? Gordon repeated, his eyebrows rising in disbelief. Yes. According to the priest, 5 years ago a couple came to him in the middle of the night and asked to be married immediately, Jeffrey explained. Gordon's eyes widened and he chuckled. What kind of made-up story is this? He remarked, laughing at the absurdity. Well, sir, do you have any other explanation for your inability to remember your marriage with Nara? Jeffrey's tone grew serious, his expression unyielding. Gordon fell silent for a moment, trying to process the information. Where is this church? He finally asked. It was a church in Hawaii, Jeffrey said. Hawaii? Gordon exclaimed, incredulity in his voice. Yes, sir, Jeffrey confirmed. That's impossible. I haven't been to Hawaii in a long time. Gordon's voice trailed off as a realization hit him. He had indeed traveled to Hawaii for an event around the same time he got married. He recalled waking up in his hotel room the day after the supposed wedding with a throbbing headache. Could it have been because I was drunk? He muttered to himself. Sir, are you going to tell her? Jeffrey asked, breaking Gordon's reverie. Who? Gordon asked, still lost in thought. Nara, of course. Or should I tell her myself? Jeffrey's tone suggested a willingness to take on the task if necessary. No, I'll do it myself, Gordon replied firmly. Jeffrey looked taken aback. He had always been the one to handle such matters, and Gordon rarely took the initiative to address personal issues directly. Okay, sir? Jeffrey said with a shrug. Jeffrey, take the day off. I won't be needing you for the rest of the day, Gordon said. Thank you, sir. Jeffrey replied with a smile and a nod before leaving Gordon's study. Gordon, still reeling from the unexpected news, stood up and walked over to his bookshelf. He approached his safe, inputting the passcode with a practiced motion. The safe clicked open, and he retrieved a document. Opening it, he found his marriage certificate and the contract Nara had signed. He examined the marriage certificate closely. The name of the church was scrawled on a corner. After closing the safe, Gordon returned to his laptop. He searched for the church's name online, and after a few moments he found a news article. The church was demolished 3 years ago and made headlines. As he looked at the images of the church, with its strikingly colorful windows and distinctive architecture, a jolt of recognition hit him. The building was unmistakably familiar. Memories began to resurface, and Gordon now recalled the events of that night vividly. The realization struck him. He had indeed been to that church, and the fragmented recollections of the wedding began to piece together in his mind. Domino's Bakery stood out as the town's most popular spot. By 8 in the morning, a long queue stretched outside as people lined up to place their orders. The bakery's reputation was exceptional to the extent that rumors were heard that the owner let the dough ferment for 3 days, creating pastries that were renowned for their freshness and sweetness. Jeffrey, a bread enthusiast, was no exception to the bakery's allure. Since returning to the country with Gordon, he had become a regular, often seen in the line. Today, as soon as he left Gordon's place, he drove straight to Domino's. He parked his car by the side of the road and hurried to the bakery. Upon entering, Jeffrey noticed the shelves were empty. a sign he had arrived too late. As he turned to leave, a voice called out to him. "Excuse me, sir." He turned to see a young woman wearing an apron and a head covering. Her bright smile and friendly demeanor stood out. "Huh?" Jeffrey responded, puzzled by the attention. She approached him, her smile never wavering. "You're here to buy bread, right?" she asked cheerfully. "How did you know?" Jeffrey asked, taken aback. "Well, I have a knack for noticing special customers," she said, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. "Special?" Jeffrey echoed, still confused by her warmth. "Do you want the bread or not?" she asked quickly. "Yes, yeah," Jeffrey replied, his confusion deepening. "Come with me," she beckoned, leading him to the counter. "I saved this last one for you." Jeffrey was stunned. "How did you know I would come for it?" "Well, you're always here every morning. I figured if you didn't come this morning, you might come later in the day," she explained. Jeffrey adjusted his glasses, trying to make sense of the situation. "Thank you," he muttered. "It's fine. Your card, please," she said, extending her hand. He handed her his card, and she swiftly processed the payment. "Here," she said, returning the bread and his card. "Thank you," Jeffrey said again, feeling more perplexed. "I'll get going now." "Wait, what's your name?" she asked, her eyes still bright. "Huh?" he asked, bewildered. "Your name. What's your name?" she repeated. "Jeffrey," he replied hesitantly. "I'm Rose," she said with a smile. Jeffrey was taken aback by her boldness and the ease of their exchange. He had never noticed her before and couldn't quite understand why she was so friendly. The interaction felt oddly familiar, yet entirely new. "Okay then, bye," he said, eager to leave. "Bye," Rose replied, waving as he walked out. Jeffrey shrugged off the encounter as he stepped into his car, turned on the ignition, and decided to set the matter aside. Elena stepped out of her house after seeing Nara off, feeling the cool night air brush against her face like a refreshing sea breeze. Her hair fluttered behind her as she suddenly craved a drink. She hailed a taxi that was about to pass by. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked. "Deluxe Club," Elena decided after a moment's thought, choosing the perfect place to unwind. The taxi pulled up in front of Deluxe Club, where flashing lights cut through the night sky and pulsating music could be heard from outside. Elena's face lit up with a smile. This was exactly what she needed. She paid the driver and hurried inside. The club was packed, its energy palpable as people danced energetically. Elena made her way to the bar, slipping onto a stool and calling out to the bartender over the thumping music. "I'd like a martini!" she shouted. A few minutes later, the bartender delivered her drink. Elena downed it in a single gulp and immediately requested another. Drinking to excess was her go-to method for clearing her mind, and tonight was no different. As she reached for her second martini, someone jostled her, causing the glass to topple and shatter on the floor. "Are you blind?" Elena shouted as she turned to confront the person who had bumped into her. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw it was Andrew. "Andrew!" she exclaimed, taken aback. Andrew looked at her with a drunken grin, laughing heartily. He was clearly extremely inebriated. "What are you doing here?" Elena asked, scanning the club for any signs that he was with someone. "None of your business," he slurred, struggling to stay upright. Seeing his condition, Elena realized he was in no shape to find his way home on his own. She turned to the bartender, handed him some bills, and then focused on Andrew. She grabbed his arms gently. "Let's get you home." "Leave me," Andrew roared, pushing her hands away. "Come on, Andrew, I can't leave you like this," Elena pleaded, gripping his arms firmly. Navigating him through the crowded club was a challenge, but eventually, they made it outside. Elena tried to hail a taxi while holding Andrew steady. After several moments, a taxi finally pulled up. Elena carefully helped Andrew into the car and climbed in beside him. Suddenly, she realized she didn't know Andrew's address. She pulled out her phone to call Nara, but after several unanswered rings, she decided to take Andrew to her own place. As she turned to check on Andrew, she saw he had already fallen asleep. Elena sighed deeply, feeling a mixture of frustration and concern, and closed her eyes, resigned to the unexpected turn of events. Finally, the taxi pulled up in front of Elena's house. "Andrew," she said, gently tapping him to wake him up, but he remained fast asleep. "Don't worry, ma'am, I'll help you with him," the taxi driver offered. With his assistance, Elena managed to get Andrew into her house, where they carefully laid him down on the sofa. "Thank you," Elena said, breathing heavily from the effort. "It's no problem, ma'am. I'll be on my way now," the driver said, closing the door behind him. Elena looked at Andrew, sprawled out on her couch like a lifeless log. How much did he really drink? She wondered aloud. She decided to freshen up and headed to her bathroom. After a quick refresh, Elena changed into her pajamas and returned to the living room. Andrew was still asleep. As she looked at him, an unexpected tenderness surged through her. She leaned in, her hand gently brushing across his face. Despite the strong smell of alcohol, she didn't care. "Nara," Andrew murmured softly, startling Elena. When he mentioned Nara's name, she frowned, preparing to stand up and leave. But then she felt a hand clasping hers. Andrew was holding on to her, his eyes still closed. "Don't leave me, Nara," he pleaded, his grip firm despite his unconscious state. Before Elena could react, Andrew pulled her gently towards him, drawing her into his chest. She could feel his heartbeat steady and strong. As she raised her head, she took in his relaxed, handsome face. Slowly, Andrew's eyes opened and met hers. "Nara, you didn't leave," he said softly. He tilted his head slightly and pressed his lips to hers. Elena's eyes widened in shock. The situation felt surreal, but as the kiss deepened, she slowly relaxed into it. Nara had just finished her nightly bath, her skin still damp and warm, when her phone rang unexpectedly. She dashed to answer it, seeing Yvonne's name flashing on the screen. Her face fell immediately, a mix of annoyance and resignation taking over. "Hello?" she muttered, her voice barely masking her irritation. "Dad said you should bring Gordon over for dinner tomorrow." Yvonne's voice came through with a tone laced with mischief. Nara's eyes widened in surprise. "Huh?" she stammered. "Are you deaf?" Yvonne snapped, clearly frustrated. "Well, I've delayed my message," she added with a dismissive sigh. Confusion and a surge of dread overwhelmed Nara. Yvonne's abruptness only heightened her anxiety. She tried to protest. "Isn't it too early for that? I mean, we—" But the call abruptly ended before she could finish. Yvonne had hung up on her, leaving Nara staring at the phone in dismay. She slumped onto her bed, her heart sinking. The thought of facing her father and sitting through dinner with him was almost unbearable. She was well acquainted with Yvonne and Gwen's schemes, and this dinner felt like another ploy to embarrass her in front of Gordon. But then, a wave of unexpected relief washed over her. She wondered why she was so afraid. After all, she had faced many of their antics before. The sudden clatter of the windows caught her off guard, jolting her from her thoughts. A cold gust of wind swept through the room, making her shiver. Instinctively, she rushed to the window and shut it tight. As she turned to return to her bed, a new restlessness took hold of her. Sleep was now the farthest thing from her mind, and an urgent desire for a midnight stroll emerged. Quickly, she grabbed her robe and wrapped it around herself, securing it with swift movements. She opened her bedroom door, stepped out into the quiet hallway, and closed the door behind her with a soft click. She looked ahead, her gaze fixed on the door to Gordon's room. She suddenly felt the need to also relay the news to him. She stood there, hesitating, her fingers hovering over the brass doorknob which gleamed faintly in the soft light of the hallway. She could feel the cool metal beneath her fingertips, and just as she was about to turn it, she stopped abruptly. Her hand trembled slightly as she raised it once more, this time to knock on the door. But again she hesitated, her fingers lingering in the air. The soft hum of the house at night seemed to grow louder in the quiet moments, and she realized that she didn't want to disturb Gordon if he was fast asleep. The thought of potentially waking him with her news made her reconsider. With a sigh, she dropped her hand and turned away from the door. The decision to wait until morning settled in her mind, and she slowly made her way downstairs, her footsteps muffled on the carpeted stairs. Descending the stairs, Nara was struck by the eerie emptiness of the villa. It was the first time she had ventured downstairs in the dead of night since moving in with Gordon. The usually bustling villa, filled with the presence of bodyguards, was now silent and still. To her surprise, the entrance door stood wide open, casting a faint light from the outside into the dimly lit hallway. A grin spread across her face as she approached the door, the thrill of freedom and the promise of a quiet stroll beckoning her forward. "Who is there?" A voice broke the silence, startling Nara. She spun around to find Stella standing by the door leading to the pantry. "It's me," Nara replied, trying to steady her nerves. "Why are you awake, dear?" Stella asked, walking toward her with a look of concern. "I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd take a walk outside," Nara explained. "Are you okay, dear? Do you need something to eat?" Stella's voice was warm and caring. Nara managed to smile. "I'm okay, I just need to clear my head." "Are you sure?" Stella asked, her brow furrowing slightly. Nara nodded firmly. "Yes, I'm sure, okay, if you insist. I'll be upstairs. Make sure you come inside quickly before you catch a cold," Stella advised, giving Nara a reassuring smile before turning and heading up the stairs. Nara made her way to the entrance door, stepping outside into the crisp night air. She walked towards the poolside, which lay at the far end of the villa's expansive grounds. The night was quiet, the only sounds being the gentle lapping of water and the distant rustling of leaves. As she approached the pool, her breath caught in her throat. A solitary figure stood by the edge of the pool, staring intently at the water. For a moment, Nara felt a jolt of fear, but as she drew closer, she recognized the figure as Gordon. Gordon turned in her direction at the same moment, his face illuminated by the soft ambient light from the pool's edge. Their eyes met and the tension in the air was palpable. "What are you doing here?" Gordon asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Can't sleep," Nara replied, walking toward him with a sense of resignation. Same here," he said with a smile that softened his usually stern demeanor. Nara nudged him playfully, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Now what's making the great Gordon Antonov lose sleep?" Gordon's smile widened. "Nothing, really. I just don't feel like sleeping." Nara sighed, exhausted, and settled beside the pool, letting her legs dangle in the cool water. She took a deep breath, savoring the crisp evening air as it mingled with the gentle scent of the surrounding flora. "You know," she said, gazing at the shimmering surface of the pool, "some days are like that. You want to sleep, but you just can't." Gordon lowered himself onto the edge of the pool beside her, his legs dipping into the water as well. "So tell me, Miss Vespertine, what's keeping you awake?" Nara laughed softly. "Why do you always call me that?" "What, Miss Vespertine?" Gordon asked with a hint of confusion. "Yes, exactly that. Isn't that your name?" Gordon asked, his smile lingering as he looked at her. Nara sighed, clearly not in the mood for a debate about her name. "Yvonne called tonight." "Yvonne?" Gordon asked, his brow furrowing as he tried to place the name. "Yes, my sister, or stepsister, rather." "Oh, that Yvonne," Gordon said, a hint of recognition in his voice. "Wait, don't tell me you don't even know my sister's name?" Nara asked, clearly taken aback. "Well, she's not exactly relevant to me, is she?" Gordon responded with a shrug. Nara laughed, shaking her head. "You know, you're really something," she said, giving him a playful look. "Well, she called to say that Dad is inviting us over for dinner tomorrow," Nara continued, her tone calm. "Why don't you sound more excited about it?" Gordon asked, his concern evident in his expression. Nara glanced at him, trying to force a smile. "Oh, it's nothing." She then added, "But if you can't do it, I could call and ask them to postpone." "No, don't do that. It's high time I met your parents." "Tomorrow will be perfect," Gordon said firmly. "Are you sure?" Nara asked, searching for confirmation. "Yes, of course." "Okay then," she replied, her mood lifting as she kicked her feet against the water, sending playful splashes around them. "Tell me, what's your family like?" Gordon asked suddenly, catching Nara off guard. Nara stopped splashing and turned to him, her brow furrowed. "Why are you asking this all of a sudden?" "Is there a problem with me asking?" Gordon inquired, his tone genuine. Nara burst into laughter, shaking her head. "When has Gordon Antonov ever cared about anyone other than himself?" she said amid her chuckles. Gordon smiled warmly, his gaze fixed on her. "Well, today's your lucky day." "I'm in the mood to listen," he said with a chuckle, his eyes reflecting a rare, earnest interest. "There's nothing special about my family, just a typical peaceful American family," Nara said, gesturing with her hands as if to emphasize the ordinariness of her background. "Doesn't seem that way to me," Gordon replied, his tone thoughtful. "Huh? At our family dinner, your sister barely looked at you or spoke to you. When she did, it was only to comment about you being illegitimate." Nara forced a smile. "Yvonne isn't that bad. She can be nice when she wants to be." Gordon glanced at her, then turned his gaze forward without commenting. "Now what's that look?" Nara asked, raising an eyebrow. "What look?" Gordon responded with a smile. "That look? The one you give when you think someone's opinion doesn't matter." Gordon burst into laughter. "You can't be serious. I don't have that kind of look." "Yes, you do, and you just did it now." Gordon continued to laugh. "Well, forgive me, Miss Vespertine, if my handsome face annoys you." Nara laughed heartily. "Handsome my foot," she said, still giggling. Gordon joined in her laughter, the two of them sharing a moment of lightheartedness. Eventually, Nara's laughter subsided, replaced by a deep sigh of both relief and frustration. "I was sent to live with my father right after my mother passed away. My stepmother wasn't too keen on me staying, but after my father's insistence, she agreed. The first few years were really tough, but it's better now. I live alone and don't have to see them much anymore. Was it really that bad?" Gordon asked, his face reflecting genuine concern. Nara gave a small, sad smile and nodded in response. "I'm sorry about everything you went through," he said softly. "Have I not told you before?" "You say sorry when you've caused something," Nara replied, her tone gentle but firm. Gordon chuckled heartily, and for a moment the atmosphere grew quiet as they both gazed up at the star-filled night sky. The cool breeze brushed against their faces, adding a serene touch to the night. "Let's go inside. It's getting late," Gordon suggested after a moment. Nara nodded in agreement and started to stand up. Gordon followed suit, but in his haste accidentally nudged Nara. She lost her balance and tumbled into the pool with a splash. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" Gordon exclaimed, his eyes widening in surprise at the unintentional mishap. "Ah, now I'm all wet!" Nara cried out, her voice tinged with frustration. Gordon moved closer to the pool and extended his hand toward her. "Here," he said, offering his hand to help her out. Nara grabbed his hand but then gave him a mischievous grin. "Don't even think about it," Gordon warned, catching on to her playful intent. Nara, however, tightened her grip on his hand and pulled him into the pool with her. He landed with a splash, and Nara's laughter erupted uncontrollably. "Now how do you like being wet?" she teased, her smile radiant despite the situation. Gordon gazed intently at her, captivated by her long black hair that clung to her face in wet strands. Despite being drenched, her natural beauty shone through, glowing with an effortless allure. As she swam out of the pool, her body shivered like a leaf caught in the wind, emphasizing her delicate grace. "Won't you get out of there?" she called, her voice light with laughter. The playful challenge in her tone prompted a sudden realization in Gordon. He would catch a cold if he stayed in the water much longer. With a decisive stroke, he hurried out of the pool. Both of them were shaking from the chill. "Race you inside!" Nara exclaimed with a mischievous grin and bolted toward the house. Gordon, still reveling in their playful banter, shouted back, "I'll get you back for this, Miss Vespertine," as he sprinted after her. Their laughter rang out, mingling with the echoes of the night. The sound of clattering utensils jolted Andrew from his sleep. He squinted against the bright morning sunlight streaming through the window, struggling to make sense of his surroundings. The room was unfamiliar, starkly different from his own home. Panic began to set in as he wondered if he had been kidnapped. His last clear memory was of the Deluxe Club, where he had been drinking and dancing. With his eyes now opened clearly, he got a glimpse of the front door. He decided to act fast. Determined to escape, Andrew attempted to stand, but a sharp pain throbbed through his head, making him wince. "Ouch!" he exclaimed, clutching his forehead. The sound of footsteps grew louder, increasing his anxiety. He braced himself, expecting someone to approach. "You are finally awake." A familiar voice pierced through his discomfort. Despite the throbbing pain, the voice rang with a sense of recognition. Andrew turned slowly, his heartbeat quickening as he saw Elena. Relief washed over him as his initial fear dissipated. Elena approached with a reassuring smile, holding a glass of tea. "Here, I made some hangover tea for you," she said gently. Andrew accepted the glass gratefully, savoring the soothing warmth of the drink. The bitterness of the tea was a welcome relief, and he sighed in appreciation. "Thank you," he said, handing back the empty glass. Elena set the glass on a nearby stool and sat down on one of the plush sofas, her demeanor calm and composed. "You don't have to worry," she said, her voice comforting. "This will help with the headache. Just give it a little time." Andrew nodded, trying to piece together the events of the previous night. How? How did I get here? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. Elena's smile widened as she settled on the sofa. Well, I found you at the Deluxe Club last night. Andrew's confusion deepened. How did you know I was there? Wait a minute. I thought you were out of the country or something. Elena chuckled softly. I got back recently. Didn't Nara tell you? Andrew shook his head, indicating that he had no knowledge of the topic Elena seemed about to discuss. Then that means she didn't tell you about the... She stopped talking abruptly. Her expression shifted from casual to cautious as she realized she was not in a position to bring up Nara's involvement with Dynasty. About what? Andrew pressed, sensing there was more to her words. Oh, nothing. Never mind, Elena replied quickly, her smile faltering. Andrew scrutinized her with a hint of suspicion, but his primary concern was alleviating his throbbing headache and finding his way out of the unfamiliar setting. I made breakfast if you'd like some, Elena offered, her voice inviting but tinged with a hint of disappointment. Oh, don't bother. I want to get going now, Andrew said, standing up and beginning to head for the door. Elena's smile vanished, replaced by a look of surprise. She had risen early to prepare breakfast for him and felt a pang of disappointment at his abrupt departure. Have breakfast before you leave. I took my time to make it, she urged, her tone earnest. Andrew felt a sudden discomfort at her insistence. Although he knew Elena, their relationship was not close, and he found her unexpected hospitality puzzling. Don't worry about it. Thank you for your help, he said, his voice polite but distant. For bringing me here safely, rather. He turned towards the door, glancing back at Elena. Her face was a mask of neutral expression, revealing nothing of her thoughts. I'll get going now, he said firmly before stepping out and closing the door behind him. Elena stood there, her surprise and perplexity palpable as she watched him leave. Jacob Antonov was enjoying breakfast with his wife Penelope and Briston. The atmosphere was calm, punctuated only by the gentle clinking of cutlery against plates. Without warning, Briston stood up abruptly. I will get going now, he announced. Penelope glanced at his half-finished meal, concern evident on her face. But you're not yet done with your breakfast. I'm okay, Mum. I'm not that hungry. And besides, I have something urgent to attend to, Briston replied, his tone firm but respectful. But you know you dote on him a lot. If he says he's okay, then he is, Jacob interjected, his voice sharp and surprising Penelope. Briston nodded at his mother and left the room, leaving Jacob and Penelope alone. You know I do not appreciate your tone earlier, Penelope began once Briston had departed. Jacob looked up, his eyebrows furrowing in confusion. What do you mean by my tone? I mean, why didn't you wait for him to leave before you spoke? Penelope's voice was laced with irritation. Jacob burst into laughter, shaking his head. Look, I don't understand what you're trying to say, he said, his amusement clear. Penelope glared at him, her face a mix of annoyance and anger. Sensing her displeasure, Jacob gently placed his hand on hers. Okay, I'm sorry, he said, his tone sincere. Penelope's expression softened, and a smile spread across her face, exactly what she wanted to hear. Now would you kindly let me enjoy my breakfast in peace? Jacob asked, his smile warm and genuine. You may, Penelope replied, her irritation melting away. Both of them laughed softly, their earlier tension fading as they continued their breakfast in a more relaxed mood. That reminds me, I wanted to discuss something with you, Jacob said after finishing his coffee. What's it about? She asked. Yvonne, Jacob replied. The moment she heard the name, she sighed with irritation. What's it about Yvonne? She asked, trying to hide her annoyance. Do you think your son is making the right decision to marry her? Jacob asked. My son? She was surprised, feeling as if Jacob was implying Briston was only her responsibility. Yes, Briston, Jacob said, not noticing the irritation in her voice. Do you think he is making the right choice marrying Yvonne? Penelope's annoyance grew. Even though she had never liked Yvonne, she didn't want to give Jacob the satisfaction of admitting it, especially since he seemed to regard Briston as her sole responsibility. And you think that illegitimate thing is also good for your son? She snapped. Jacob looked at her in surprise. Is it Nara you're referring to as an illegitimate thing? Yes, of course, Penelope said sharply. Jacob remained calm, well aware of Penelope's tendency to escalate matters. There's nothing wrong with Nara being married to Gordon, he said calmly. Wait, so you're okay with that? Do you know the kind of rumors it would cause? She's illegitimate, a child her father doesn't even care about, Penelope argued. So? Jacob asked, catching her off guard. Penelope noticed that Jacob's expression was similar to Gordon's when he thought no one else had a valid opinion. Jacob and Gordon shared a similar attitude. Nara is a nice girl, and Gordon likes her, illegitimate or not. At least she's better than that Yvonne girl, Jacob said firmly. Penelope stared at him, both dumbfounded and unsurprised. She knew Jacob always supported Gordon's actions and had a preference for him over Briston, though she was unwilling to admit it. Now Gordon is married. I think it's time I handed over everything to him. What do you mean by everything? The company, of course. Penelope's sharp eyes widened in surprise as she looked up from her plate, her posture straightening instinctively. The clinking of cutlery paused as Jacob's words sank in. He was seated at the head of the dining table, his face a mask of calm determination, his dark eyes gleaming with an almost imperceptible smirk. Wait, how do you wake up and make decisions like that without involving me first? Penelope asked, her voice laced with a mix of frustration and disbelief. Her usually composed demeanor was cracking, revealing a flicker of anger. Jacob's smile was cool and unbothered as he leaned back in his chair, the dim light casting a shadow across his angular features. Do I really need to discuss how I handled trivial matters like this? Since when did you get so interested in the company? His tone was dismissive, his eyes glinting with a trace of irritation. Penelope's face flushed with a subtle shade of red, her eyes narrowing as her frustration mounted. She held Jacob's gaze, her determination not to show her annoyance evident in the tense set of her jaw. Well, now I'm interested, she said, her voice strained but resolute. Jacob's reply was sharp and final, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. I don't think you are in any position to have this discussion with me. The suddenness of his tone caught Penelope off guard, causing her to set down her cutlery with a clatter. Her eyes, now flashing with anger, met his as she adjusted her posture, her earlier composure slipping away. So where does that leave Briston, who has been working so hard in that company ever since that son of yours flew abroad? She demanded, her voice rising in volume and emotion. The heat of the argument was palpable, the air between them charged with tension. Jacob picked up a napkin and wiped his mouth. Have a talk with your son and make him reconsider his decision. I don't want him marrying someone who might bring disgrace to the family, he said, standing up. He was about to leave but paused abruptly. Did I tell you that Peter is back? Penelope's eyes widened in surprise at the mention of Peter's name. She suddenly felt her palms grow sweaty and a lump forming in her throat. She lifted her gaze to Jacob. Peter is back? Her voice was uneasy and shaky. Oh yes, he is, and he's back for good, Jacob confirmed. Penelope managed to force a smile. That's good to hear, she said, her smile clearly strained. Jacob leaned in and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. I'll be going now, he said, and then headed out, leaving Penelope alone with her thoughts about the news. Andrew stood in the shower, letting the water cascade over him from head to toe. He felt a sense of relief as the warm droplets relaxed his tense muscles. As the water blurred his vision, memories of the previous night at Elena's house flooded back. He recalled the kiss they had shared, and shock etched across his face. What have I done? He exclaimed in disbelief. He quickly turned off the shower, grabbed a towel, and wrapped it around his waist before hurrying out of the bathroom. In a state of confusion, he paced around the room shouting, "What have I done?" He scratched his head, trying to piece together the events. He remembered calling out Nara's name in his sleep, but the person he had kissed was Elena. He knew he had made a mistake. Panicking, he grabbed his phone, hoping to call Elena. He wasn't sure if he had her number, but then he remembered that Nara had given it to him just in case. He quickly found the number and dialed it. After a few rings, Elena answered. Hello. Her calm voice came through the receiver. It's Andrew, he said urgently. How did you get my number? Elena asked, puzzled. Forget about that. What happened last night? Andrew demanded. Woo, calm down, will you? Elena's voice was sharp and edged with frustration as she spoke into the phone. Look, I have vague memories of everything, and I think you're the only person who can clear this up. Andrew's voice wavered with a mix of desperation and confusion. Elena's response was cold and dismissive. Well, I don't have anything to say to you, she fired back, her voice laced with irritation and finality. Andrew, undeterred, took a deep breath. You know what? I'll send you an address. Meet me there, he said, his tone firm and resolute, signaling the end of the conversation before abruptly hanging up the phone. Nara descended the staircase with a radiant smile and a tune on her lips, clearly still basking in the joy of the previous night's conversation with Gordon. Her laughter, a bright and infectious sound, echoed through the house as she recalled their playful moment by the pool. Stella, who was meticulously setting the dining table alongside a maid, looked up in surprise at the sound. She paused her work, her face breaking into a warm smile upon seeing Nara. She had recently observed a noticeable shift in Nara's mood, which had been brighter and more cheerful, and it brought her a sense of satisfaction. Good morning, Ma Stella, Nara said, enveloping Stella in a hug and placing a gentle kiss on her cheek. The maid beside Stella, a young woman with neatly tied back hair and a modest uniform, bowed respectfully. Nara, momentarily taken aback by the maid's presence, nodded in acknowledgement. Stella's smile widened as she commented, You have been radiating every morning of late. Nara, slightly embarrassed but pleased, responded, Really? Stella nodded, her gaze both curious and affectionate. Yes, of course. Now tell me, what made you laugh so hard just now? Nara's cheeks flushed a little as she avoided Stella's gaze, murmuring, Oh, it's nothing. Stella's look was both amused and inquisitive. Come on, there must be something. Nara quickly added, Stop, Ma Stella, it's really nothing. I just woke up on the right side of the bed. Okay, if you say so, Stella replied, still smiling. As Nara glanced around the dining area, she noticed Gordon was absent from the table, a rarity given that she usually saw him there first. He's not down yet? Stella, noting Nara's surprise, reassured her. Who, Gordon? Oh no, it's still too early. He'll be down in 30 minutes. Nara, slightly startled by the realization of how early she must have woken, was intrigued. Have a seat. Let me get breakfast out, Stella offered. Nara shook her head. Oh no, I'd rather accompany you. I don't want to sit here alone. Stella looked surprised at Nara's eagerness. You want to come to the kitchen with me? Is there anything wrong with that? Nara asked casually, her tone light and friendly. Oh no, Stella replied, chuckling. Let's go then, Nara said, her smile wide as she led the way. She stopped abruptly. Which way is it again? Stella laughed heartily. Follow me, silly. As they entered Gordon's kitchen, Nara was immediately struck by its grandeur. The kitchen was vast and impeccably organized, showcasing Gordon's exquisite taste. Every item was meticulously placed, reflecting a high standard of elegance and functionality. Wow, this is huge! Nara exclaimed, her eyes wide with amazement. As she took in the scene, the rich aroma of freshly cooked meals began to waft through the air. Nara's gaze swept across the kitchen, noting an array of buffets brimming with various dishes. Her curiosity piqued, she scanned the area for a chef, but found only Stella and the young maid beside her. Where is the chef? Nara asked, surprised. Chef? Stella echoed, puzzled. Yes, the chef, Nara clarified. There is no chef, Nara. I made all these myself, Stella said with a hint of pride. Huh, you did all this yourself? Nara's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. Yes, we made them together, Stella said, gesturing to the young maid. Wow, I'm amazed, Nara replied, impressed by the sheer quantity of food prepared by just 2 people. She wondered when they had woken up to do all this and why Gordon, with his resources, hadn't employed more chefs. It was clear that Stella, despite the workload, seemed genuinely content and dedicated. This is Mel. I haven't had the chance to introduce her to you since you arrived, Stella said, pointing to the young maid. Nara smiled warmly and extended her hand. Nice to meet you. Mel, a shy girl with a modest demeanor, timidly bowed. Pleasure meeting you, ma'am, she murmured softly. Nara was momentarily taken aback and withdrew her hand quickly. Stella smiled reassuringly and approached the buffet table. Mel is such a shy girl. Don't worry. Once you get to know her, you'll love her. She picked up a buffet containing fried eggs. Let me help you with that, Nara offered, taking the buffet from Stella's hands. Thank you, Stella said gratefully. Mel picked up a buffet of baked bacon and led the way out of the kitchen. When they arrived at the dining table, Gordon was already seated, his expression one of surprise at Nara's early appearance. His eyes widened slightly as he looked at her, clearly not expecting her to be up before him. Good morning, Nara greeted cheerfully, her smile bright and genuine. Good morning, Gordon replied, returning the smile with equal warmth. Stella, who had followed them, observed the exchange with a hint of curiosity. She couldn't help but notice the change in the dynamic between the two. The usual tension seemed to have eased, particularly between Nara and Gordon, which intrigued her. What's making the both of you smile like that? Stella asked, her tone sharp yet playful, as Nara placed the buffet on the table. Nothing! Both Nara and Gordon replied in unison, a little too quickly. Stella raised an eyebrow at their synchronized response, sensing that something was amiss, but chose to let it go for now. She noticed that Nara, who had previously sat 2 seats away from Gordon, had taken the seat right next to him. This was a first, and Stella couldn't help but smile at the change. Go get the remaining buffets in the coffee mug, Stella instructed Mel, who quickly hurried back to the kitchen. As Stella began to serve the eggs and bacon onto their plates, she suddenly paused. That reminds me, I think there's a ghost in the house. Ghost? Gordon asked, visibly taken aback. Stella, what do you mean by ghosts? Nara inquired, her curiosity piqued. You didn't hear it? Stella asked, clearly surprised by their calm demeanor. Hear what? Gordon responded, his confusion apparent. The voices, the laughter last night, Stella explained, her eyes wide. At the poolside I heard voices, sounds of laughter and splashing. I think we might have a ghost in the house. Gordon and Nara exchanged quick, knowing glances. The ghosts Stella referred to were likely them, and they struggled to suppress their laughter. Gordon grabbed his phone and pretended to focus on the screen, though his heart raced and sweat formed on his forehead. Let me help you with that, Nara said, standing up and taking the spoon from Stella, who looked puzzled by their peculiar behavior. Andrew sat in a quiet eatery, a glass of chilled water in front of him, its ice already melting and trickling down the sides. He stared at the condensation, his mind swirling with thoughts. He was troubled by the events of the previous night at Elena's house, how he had ended up kissing her and what had transpired afterward. His face was etched with concern as he picked up his phone, contemplating calling Elena. Just then, the bell above the eatery's door jingled, and Elena entered. She scanned the room, her gaze moving from left to right as if searching for him. Noticing her, Andrew quickly dialed her number. I'm over here, the last table on your right, he said, raising his hand to signal her. Elena, visibly relieved, smiled and made her way to his table, sitting down across from him. I hope I didn't keep you waiting, she said, her tone light and casual. Andrew, however, nodded with irritation. He was not in the mood for small talk. Look, let's cut to the chase. Tell me what I want to hear, he demanded. Geez, I just arrived, Elena replied, calling over a waiter with a wave. Get me a glass of mango juice, she instructed with a bright smile. The waiter nodded and left with a friendly smile. Andrew's displeasure was evident. Elena's cheerful demeanor grated on him, especially given his current mood and the situation he found himself in. Elena, still smiling, turned her attention back to Andrew. What would you like to hear? Everything, Andrew replied tersely. Elena's smile took on a sarcastic edge as the waiter quickly returned with her order. Wow, that was fast, she remarked as the waiter placed the glass of mango juice on the table. Enjoy, the waiter said before leaving. Elena picked up the glass, which had a straw, and took a sip before setting it back down. She turned her attention to Andrew, who was clearly struggling to mask his disgust. Well, Elena began, like I said, I found you at Deluxe Club when I went out for a few drinks. You were already pretty wasted when I saw you. So? Andrew replied, his frustration evident. You could have taken my phone and called someone, or possibly reached out to Nara. At the mention of Nara, Elena burst into laughter, her eyes sparkling with amusement. You're such a clown, she said between fits of giggles. Andrew gave her a stern look but remained silent, his frustration evident. "Well, I didn't think of that," Elena continued, her laughter subsiding. "Moreover, I tried calling Nara, but she wasn't answering any of my calls. What was I supposed to do? I decided to take you home." Andrew's tension eased slightly as he considered her explanation. For the first time, he saw some logic in her actions. "Okay, so the kiss," Andrew said, trying to piece together the events. "How did we end up kissing?" Elena took another sip of her mango juice, her face showing a mix of mischief and amusement. "Well, you were shouting Nara's name in your sleep. When I came over to calm you down, you grabbed me and kissed me," she said, her expression playful and lighthearted. "I kissed you. I couldn't have possibly done that," Andrew exclaimed, clearly in disbelief. "Oh yes, you did," Elena replied, tilting her head and twirling the straw with her tongue, clearly enjoying the moment. "Okay, so what happened after that?" Andrew asked, his face now tense and anxious. He was keen to know what transpired after the kiss. Elena's gaze met his, her face a mask of feigned seriousness. She knew nothing significant had happened after the kiss. Andrew had fallen asleep immediately. However, she decided to tease him. "Well, we did whatever happens after two people kiss," she said, her smile widening mischievously. "What?" Andrew asked, his voice tinged with panic. Elena rolled her eyes, her fingers idly playing with the straw in her mango juice. "That's not possible," Andrew said, trying to dismiss the conversation. Elena's smile grew wider. "Tell me why it isn't possible," she said, her tone teasing. "I can't remember doing that," Andrew replied, clearly frustrated. "Well, that's your problem, not mine," Elena shot back, her bluntness surprising Andrew. He was taken aback by her harshness and wondered how she and Nara could be friends. "Don't you feel at least a bit sorry for what you've done?" Andrew asked. "What have I done? Or don't you mean what you've done?" Elena retorted, a hint of scorn in her voice. "Huh?" Andrew responded, confused. "Yes, aren't you supposed to apologize to me for kissing me first?" Elena snapped, her tone sharp. "You are evil," Andrew said, finally letting his disgust show. It was clear on his face. Elena met his gaze with a smirk. "Why are you so bothered about a little kiss? Is it because of Nara?" She burst into laughter. "Wait, do you think Nara cares about you? Oh my God, you're such a fool to think you'd remain faithful to her for a whole year while she's living under the same roof with another man," she taunted. "Look, this matter is between us. Leave Nara out of it," Andrew insisted. "You're still defending her?" Elena's smile was cruel. "Well, you can continue thinking that way. She'll never come back to you. Now that she's signed to Dynasty, she's no longer on the same level as you." Andrew's face went pale with shock. He hadn't heard anything about Nara's signing with Dynasty. Elena laughed triumphantly. "She didn't tell you, did she?" she said as she stood up. "Oh, and did she mention the contract she signed?" "What contract?" Andrew asked, bewildered. "Oh, you didn't know about that either," Elena said with a smirk. "It's the one where she gets to keep $50 million after divorcing Gordon in a year." Andrew slumped back into his seat, his heart racing. The revelation was a heavy blow. He stared at Elena, anger and disbelief on his face. "You're lying, right?" he asked, his voice trembling. Elena leaned over, whispering in his ear as she planted a kiss on his cheek. "Goodbye, Andrew," she said softly. She then straightened up and walked away, the sound of her heels echoing ominously in his mind. The Vespertine mansion was abuzz with activity. Edward Vespertine, determined to impress his esteemed guest and son-in-law Gordon, had enlisted international chefs to prepare a lavish array of delicacy and cuisines for his guest. Maids scurried about, ensuring every detail was perfect and every corner sparkled for the evening's grand dinner. Edward scrutinized his wardrobe, holding up 2 suits for Gwen's approval. The suits were sharply different. One was a classic navy blue, the other a sleek black tuxedo. "Which one of these will make a good first impression?" he asked Gwen, who was busy applying the final touches to her makeup, glanced up and felt a pang of embarrassment. It was surprising to see Edward, usually so indifferent, go to such lengths for someone, and it hurt her pride. The thought unsettled her, and she struggled to mask her irritation, forcing a smile at Edward's eager, sheepish expression. After a moment of deliberation, Edward chose the black tuxedo, raising it with a satisfied grin. Gwen's smile remained strained, her thoughts conflicted between frustration and understanding. She knew this dinner was about achieving a greater goal that would benefit everyone involved. Noticing Gwen's discomfort, Edward set the tuxedo on the bed and slipped into his shower robe. "Why do you have that look on your face?" "What look?" Gwen snapped at him. Edward looked at her and sighed. He was in no mood for any of her tantrums. "Never mind, I'm going to take a shower," he said, heading towards the bathroom. Gwen sighed deeply, catching her reflection in the mirror. Content with her own appearance but still troubled, she remembered she needed to check on Yvonne. She needed to ensure Yvonne's dress was flawless and alluring enough to capture Gordon's attention. Gwen made her way to Yvonne's room, knocking softly before opening the door. Inside, Yvonne sat gracefully at her dressing table, her makeup already done. Selena stood in the corner, meticulously fitting Yvonne's dress into the mannequin. "Leave us!" Gwen instructed. Selena quickly bowed and exited the room. Yvonne turned, beaming with excitement, and asked, "Mom, how do I look?" Gwen approached her daughter, placing a gentle hand on her shoulders. She leaned in close, her voice soft as she whispered, "Do you see your reflection in the mirror?" Yvonne nodded in affirmation. "Tell me, what do you see?" Gwen asked, her tone gentle but insistent. Yvonne chuckled, slightly puzzled. "Mom, what do you mean?" "Shh, tell me, what do you see?" Gwen urged softly. Yvonne grew skeptical, her brows knitting together. "It's just me. Just my reflection," she replied, her voice trailing off. Gwen's eyes softened with warmth. "That's not what I see. I see the most beautiful woman to ever walk the face of the earth. I see the future wife of Gordon Antonov." Hearing this, Yvonne's face lit up with a bright smile. "Mum, you had me for a moment there," she said with a chuckle. Gwen stood straight, her hands still resting reassuringly on Yvonne's shoulders. "Today is our first move. You'll need to do everything you can to make Gordon notice you." Yvonne's smile faltered slightly. "How are we going to do that, Mum, when Gordon and Nara will be together all night?" "I'll handle Nara," Gwen said confidently. "I'll keep her distracted." Yvonne frowned. "What about Dad? Won't he be with Gordon too?" Gwen paused, considering. "That's not a problem. I'll think of something before then." Yvonne sighed with relief, placing her left hand over her mother's, which still rested on her shoulders. "Nara won't even know what hit her," she said with a determined smile. Just then, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Gwen's voice rose in irritation. "Who is it?" "It's me," came Selena's soft voice from outside as she cautiously opened the door. "Someone is here for Yvonne," Selena announced, her face a mask of apprehension as she stood in the doorway, glancing nervously at the two women. Gwen's gaze sharpened. "Who is it?" she demanded. It's Master Briston," Selena stammered, her eyes wide with apprehension. Gwen's expression soured at the mention of Briston's name, a flash of irritation crossing her face as she recalled her previous encounter with his mother, Penelope. "What did he say he wanted?" she asked sharply. "He said he needed to speak with Yvonne." "He's waiting outside on the porch," Selena replied quietly. Gwen waved her hand dismissively. "You can go?" Selena nodded quickly and retreated, closing the door behind her as she left. Gwen's irritation was palpable as she turned to Yvonne. "Did you tell that thing to come here?" she demanded. Yvonne looked puzzled. "I can't remember doing that," she replied. "Go find out what he wants and make it quick. You need to get ready before Gordon arrives," Gwen instructed. "Okay, Mum. I won't be long," Yvonne said, hurrying out of the room. Gwen walked over to Yvonne's dress, which hung elegantly on a mannequin. She smiled as she admired the red gown, her fingers tracing the delicate fabric. The dress was a masterpiece she had meticulously chosen and prepared for the occasion. As she caressed the neckline, her fingers brushing against the shimmering diamonds embedded in the fabric, a satisfied smile spread across her lips. "Now this is the perfect dress for today," she remarked, her pride evident in her smile. Briston paced the porch, his black shades adding a touch of sophistication to his shirt and trousers. He observed the flurry of activity around the mansion, the staff hustling to complete their tasks. The elaborate preparations piqued his curiosity about the day's significance. As he waited impatiently, he saw Yvonne approaching with a regal stride and a carefully applied makeup that accentuated her elegance. "Baby," Yvonne exclaimed with delight upon spotting him. She rushed forward, enveloping him in a warm hug. Briston embraced her tightly, momentarily lost in the comforting familiarity of her presence. "You didn't come inside?" Yvonne asked, her voice laced with curiosity. "No, I won't be staying long. What's with all the preparations? Everyone seems so busy today," Briston observed, his gaze sweeping over the bustling staff. Yvonne smiled and explained, "Oh, Daddy has guests coming over." "Guests?" Briston asked, surprised by the scale of the preparations. "Yes, Gordon and Nara are coming over for dinner," Yvonne replied. "Gordon and Nara?" Briston echoed, his surprise evident. "Yes, Daddy wants to meet Gordon today." "Wow, why didn't I get an invite?" Briston inquired, a hint of disappointment in his voice. Yvonne looked at him, slightly amused by his reaction. "Baby, it's just a welcome dinner Dad is throwing for Gordon to welcome him into the family." "Well, he didn't go to such lengths for me when I was first invited," Briston remarked, taking in the lively scene around him. Yvonne's expression softened, but she decided against voicing her thoughts, knowing it might lead to a tense discussion. Instead, she asked, "Why did you come to find me?" Briston seemed momentarily distracted by the bustling environment. "Oh, I needed to discuss something with you. Something important." "Now? Can't it wait?" Yvonne asked, her urgency evident. "Are you in a hurry? Why should it wait?" Briston pressed. "Can't you see I have a dinner to prepare for?" Yvonne responded sharply. Briston sighed. "Well, it's about Nara and Gordon." At the mention of Nara and Gordon, Yvonne's eyes brightened. "What about them?" "Well, on the day of your father's birthday party, Nara came with someone, right?" Yvonne paused, her brow furrowing as she remembered. Yes, someone she introduced as her fiancé. I think she said his name was Andrew." Briston's smile widened. "Do you know where I can find him?" Yvonne burst into laughter. "What business do I have with that low-class thing?" she spat out, catching Briston off guard. "Hey, easy, I just asked a question. There's no need for insults," Briston said, surprised by her reaction. Yvonne rolled her eyes. "I don't know anything about him. She only mentioned his name that day." Briston put his shades back on, signaling the end of their conversation. "I need to get going now," he said, giving her a quick peck on the cheek. "Bye," Yvonne replied, her face expressionless as Briston made his way to his car. She watched him leave, her face remaining neutral. As Briston drove off, she looked up and caught sight of her mother watching her from the window. They exchanged a mischievous smirk, silently acknowledging their shared amusement. Gordon stood in the hallway, dressed impeccably in a black tuxedo. His anticipation was palpable as he eagerly awaited Nara's appearance. Each second felt like an eternity, and his anxiety was almost tangible. Finally, he heard the soft click of the door to Nara's room opening, followed by the rhythmic clacking of heels on the floor. Nara emerged in a stunning black dress adorned with diamonds cascading down the sides, accentuating her graceful figure. Her long, glossy black hair flowed elegantly down her back. Her makeup was nude and flawlessly applied, enhancing her already perfect features. As she descended the stairs, her smile radiated warmth and confidence. Gordon felt his heart race at the sight of her. "I hope I didn't make you wait too long," Nara said, her smile bright and inviting. "Oh, no, you didn't," Gordon replied, his voice steady. Nara looked him over, noting how he stood out with his neatly styled black hair and striking features resembling a Greek god. His presence was undeniably captivating, and she couldn't help but smile. "You look good," she complimented him, her voice sincere. Gordon was pleasantly surprised by the compliment, as it was the first time Nara had praised him. "Thank you. You look good too," he replied, a hint of genuine warmth in his tone. Nara smiled and nodded in acknowledgement. "Shall we?" Gordon asked, gesturing toward the door. Nara agreed with a nod and followed him as he led the way outside. The ride to the Vespertine mansion was quiet, with Nara lost in thought. Her mind raced with speculations about what Gwen and Yvonne might have planned. She knew it was unusual for her father to extend such an invitation, and she suspected there was an underlying motive. She glanced at Gordon, who maintained a calm and composed demeanor throughout the journey. His flawless appearance and recent softer behavior intrigued her. Nara pondered the changes in Gordon's attitude. She had always known him to be rigid and aloof and rude, but the man beside her now seemed different from her previous impressions. He looked effortlessly handsome, his calm and collected appearance making him seem almost flawless. Nara couldn't help but wonder about the reason behind his recent shift in behavior. The man beside her now seemed like a different person from the Gordon she had known. A smile touched her lips as she turned away, noticing Gordon's gaze shifting in her direction. She quickly averted her eyes immediately. Throughout the ride, Gordon stole occasional glances at Nara, noticing the subtle worry she tried to mask. Her anxiety seemed to stem from thoughts about her family. It made him wonder on the kind of persons they were. Were they that horrible as Nara had described them? He sighed deeply as this thoughts laced through his mind. Suddenly, Gordon recalled that he had not yet shared his findings about their marriage with her. After considering it carefully, he decided against mentioning it. He was aware that she was already dealing with a lot and didn't want to burden her with this new information. As he looked down, he noticed Nara's fingers trembling slightly, a sign of her underlying nervousness. Without hesitation, he gently placed his hand over hers. Nara's eyes widened in surprise and she turned to face him, but Gordon's expression remained calm and indifferent. Nara gradually relaxed, closing her eyes as she absorbed the soothing warmth of his touch. Despite her reluctance to admit it, she found comfort in the gentle reassurance his hands provided.